Hello guys. Welcome to Pika Fiction. So in this video, we will see what if Ash was Arceus's chosen and was destined to marry every Pokegirl to save the world. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. The weight of the Alpha. The wind on Mount Coronet carried the taste of ozone and ancient stone, a biting cold that promised snow even in the late spring. It was a wind that spoke of endings and beginnings, of heights so close to the stars that the world below felt like a distant dream. Ash Ketchum, 18 now, with shoulders broadened by years of relentless travel and a gaze that held the quiet weight of countless battles, pulled his jacket tighter. The familiar weight of Pikachu on his shoulder was a small, warm anchor in the desolate landscape. "You feel it too, don't you, buddy?" Ash murmured, his breath a plume of white in the thin air. Pikachu. The electric mouse's ears twitched, its black-tipped ears swiveling to scan the jagged peaks that clawed at the bruised twilight sky. It wasn't just the cold, it was a wrongness. A psychic pressure that had been building for days, a dissonant hum at the edge of hearing that had pulled them here, to the very heart of Sinnoh, the place where legends were born and the world had almost been remade. They had followed the feeling, an instinct honed by a lifetime of running towards, not away from, the impossible. It had led them up the winding paths, past the ancient ruins, to this high, lonely precipice overlooking the spear pillar. Below, the stone platform was wreathed in an unnatural mist, a roiling, inky blackness that seemed to drink the fading light from the sky. A sound cut through the wind, a low, guttural snarl that was horribly familiar, yet utterly alien. From the black mist, figures began to emerge. A Machamp, its forearms corded with muscle, but its skin was the color of a day-old bruise, its eyes burning with a cold, violet light devoid of reason. A Golem, its rocky hide cracked and oozing a viscous shadow, its single eye a pinpoint of malevolent focus. And more. A pack of Luxray, their manes matted and their electric fur sparking with black lightning. Shadow Pokemon, Ash whispered, the name a curse on his tongue. He'd seen them before, in distant regions, whispers of a darkness that could corrupt, turning a Pokemon's spirit into a weapon of pure rage. But never like this. Never so many. Never so empty. Pikachu, let's go, Iron Tail. Pikachu was a blur of yellow, leaping from his shoulder. Its tail hardened into a silvery gleam as it spun, a living scythe aimed at the lead Luxray. The crack of the impact echoed across the mountain, but the Shadow Pokemon barely flinched. It shook its head, a low growl vibrating in its chest, and swiped with claws wreathed in dark energy. Pikachu yelped, darting back, a scorch mark smoking on its fur. These things weren't just strong, they felt no pain. "All right, new plan," Ash said, his mind racing. This wasn't a battle for sport or for honor. This was pest control. "Infernape, I choose you." The Pokeball burst open, and the firefighting monkey appeared in a flash of red light, its crown of flame blazing to life, a defiant torch against the encroaching darkness. It took one look at the approaching horde and slammed its fists together, letting out a warrior's cry. Infernape, Flare Blitz. Pikachu, Volt Tackle, full power, punch right through them. It was a strategy born of desperation and overwhelming force. The two Pokemon, Ash's strongest and his oldest partner, became twin comets of fire and lightning. They smashed into the shadow line, and for a moment, it worked. The sheer power of their combined assault sent golems tumbling and Machamps reeling. But it was like punching water. For every one they knocked down, two more took its place, their violet eyes fixed on Ash. They weren't fighting his Pokemon. They were trying to get to him. The fight became a blur of motion and desperation. Infernape was a whirlwind of mock punches and close combat, its fiery spirit refusing to yield, but it was being worn down. Its flames flickered as a Shadow Luxray landed a brutal crunch on its shoulder. Pikachu, nimble and fast, weaved through the chaos, firing thunderbolts that seemed to be absorbed by the creeping darkness, its little body already showing signs of exhaustion. A Shadow Golem, moving with unnatural speed, used Stone Edge. Jagged pillars of rock erupted from the ground. Ash dove aside, rolling through the gravel, but Infernape wasn't fast enough. A sharp stone pillar caught it in the side, sending it crashing to the ground with a cry of pain. Infernape, return. Ash recalled his fallen friend, his heart pounding against his ribs. The horde was closing in, a relentless tide of corrupted flesh and cold fury. Pikachu stood its ground in front of him, cheeks sparking defiantly, its small body a fragile shield. The giant Machamp lumbered forward, its four fists raised, glowing with a sickly purple aura. It was preparing a single, overwhelming dynamic punch. There was no time to dodge. No time for another attack. "Pikachu, get back," Ash yelled, stepping in front of his partner. Pikachu refused, planting its feet, ready to meet the blow head-on. This was it. A stupid, ignoble end on a frozen mountain, crushed by a monster that was a hollowed-out mockery of a Pokémon. Ash closed his eyes, bracing for the impact. But it never came. A light, pure and golden and absolute, tore through the twilight. It wasn't just bright, it was solid. It slammed into the clearing like a physical thing, a wave of creation itself. The shadow Pokémon didn't even have time to scream. They simply ceased to be. The inky mist, the violet eyes, the corrupted flesh, all of it was vaporized, cleansed by a power so immense it defied comprehension. The sudden silence was deafening. The pressure that had been squeezing the mountain was gone, replaced by an aura of such staggering, ancient majesty that the very stones seemed to hum with reverence. Ash opened his eyes. Pikachu was staring, its mouth agape. Standing before them, where the Machamp had been, was a being of impossible grace and power. Its form was equine, its coat a brilliant, shimmering white. A golden wheel, like a fragment of a captured sun, encircled its midsection, studded with jewels that glowed with the light of creation. Its eyes were pools of molten gold, and in them, Ash saw the birth of galaxies and the death of stars. Arceus, the alpha Pokémon, the god of their world. It took a step forward, and the ground trembled, not with weight, but with significance. But Ash, looking closer, saw something he never expected to see in the face of a god. Strain. A faint tremor ran through the deity's form. The light of the jewels on its celestial wheel flickered, like a candle fighting a gale. "You see," a voice echoed, not in Ash's ears, but in the very core of his being. The voice was a symphony and a thunderstorm, the grinding of tectonic plates and the whisper of a newborn's first breath. "The fabric unravels. The seams of my creation fray." "The shadow Pokémon," Ash managed to say, his own voice sounding thin and weak. "They are but symptoms. A fever in a dying body. There is a force, ancient and opposite. A nothingness that predates the light. You would call it the adversary. It is the great unmaking, the desire for the silence of zero. And it is winning." Arceus's golden eyes fixed on him, and Ash felt his entire life laid bare, every battle, every friendship, every failure, every triumph. He felt a sense of being weighed, of being measured. "I cannot face it directly. My full power, unleashed against such a void, would shatter the very reality I seek to preserve. It would be a battle of absolutes that would leave nothing but dust. Creation requires a champion. A vessel. A human who embodies the alpha spirit. The will to connect, to struggle, to grow, and to protect." A knot of dread tightened in Ash's stomach. He knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, what was coming next. "Why me?" "Because you have never sought power, only connection. Because you have faced the end of the world more times than any mortal should, and you have not broken. Because your heart, Ash Ketchum, burns with the fire of the first dawn. You are the only choice." Before Ash could protest, to argue that he was just a trainer from Pallet Town, Arceus reared its head. The golden wheel around its body began to spin, faster and faster, until it was a blinding ring of light. A single, perfect orb of golden energy, no bigger than a Pokeball, detached from the wheel and floated towards Ash. It pulsed with a power that made the air crackle. "This is a fragment of my own essence. The Alpha Spark. It will be your weapon, your shield, and your guide. But it is a gift that is also a terrible burden." The orb drifted forward and touched Ash's chest. Agony. It was not a burn. It was an unraveling. Ash screamed, dropping to his knees as the spark sank into him. It was 1,000,000,000 volts of lightning and a supernova exploding behind his eyes. He felt his very being rewritten, his cells saturated with a power they were never meant to contain. His aura, the life force he had learned to feel and sometimes wield, was a raging inferno, threatening to consume him. Visions flooded his mind, sharp and brutal. He saw the world cracking like glass. He saw the oceans turning to dust. He saw a sky filled with a vortex of silent, screaming blackness. He saw the faces of his friends, Misty, Brock, May, Max, Dawn, Iris, Salon, Serena, Clemont, Bonnie, Lily, all of them. Their faces contorted in terror before dissolving into shadow. And through it all, he felt the cold, dispassionate pull of the adversary, the promise of a peaceful, empty end. He felt Pikachu frantically nudging his hand, its terrified squeaks a distant echo. He was losing himself, drowning in a sea of divine energy. The spark is too volatile for any single mortal vessel, Arceus's voice cut through the pain, a lifeline in the storm. It must be anchored. It must be harmonized. You are the alpha, the center. But you must find the aspects. Souls who embody the pillars of my creation. Heart. Will. Knowledge. Instinct. Grace. Passion. They're your keys. You must forge covenants with them, bind their spirits to your own, and through that unity, you will stabilize the spark and the world itself. This is your destiny. Ash gasped, the agony receding just enough for him to breathe. He felt different. Stronger. The very air felt alive, a tapestry of energy he could almost see. He could feel Pikachu's fear as if it were his own. He could feel the cold, hard life of the mountain stone beneath his hands. And he could feel a pull. A faint, insistent tug from the south. A thread of energy, a beacon in the darkness. The first aspect is near, Arceus declared. She is in peril. Go now, herald of creation. Your trial begins. The golden light of Arceus's presence intensified, then folded in on itself and vanished, leaving behind only the scent of ozone and the heavy silence of the mountain. Ash staggered to his feet, swaying, every muscle in his body screaming. He looked down at his hands. A faint, golden light seemed to shimmer just beneath his skin. Pikapi? Pikachu asked, nudging his leg, its voice trembling. Ash took a deep, shuddering breath. He was no longer just Ash Ketchum. He was something else. A herald. A vessel. A walking, talking doomsday clock. And someone, one of his friends, was in danger. The pull was stronger now, a clear direction. Lake Verity. Come on, buddy, Ash said, his voice raw. We have to go, now. He didn't know how he was going to get there. He didn't know what he would find. All he knew was the weight in his chest, the terrifying, agonizing power of the alpha spark, and the first thread of a destiny he never asked for, pulling him towards the water. The journey to Lake Verity was a blur. Ash didn't run. He flowed. The spark inside him was a wild horse, and he was barely holding the reins. Trees and rocks seemed to part for him, his feet barely touching the ground. He moved with a preternatural speed and certainty that was both exhilarating and terrifying. Pikachu clung to his shoulder, its fur bristled, the raw power radiating from its trainer an electric blanket it couldn't escape. He arrived at the shore of the Great Lake just as the last vestiges of sunset surrendered to the encroaching night. The scene was one of chaos. The normally placid waters of Lake Verity were churning, whipped into a frenzy not by wind, but by a rupture in the center of the lake. It was a swirling vortex of purple and black energy, a wound in the world that bled wrongness into the air. From its depths, things were emerging, twisted, shadowy versions of water Pokemon, their forms distorted and their cries echoing with rage. And on the shore, standing against the tide, was a figure he would recognize anywhere. Her hair was still a fiery orange, tied up in its familiar side ponytail, though she was taller now, her swimmer's physique honed into lean, powerful muscle. She wore practical gear, waterproof and resilient, but the determined set of her jaw, the fierce glare in her cerulean eyes. That was pure, uncut Misty. She wasn't just a gym leader anymore. He'd heard the stories. She was a warden of the seas, a title bestowed by the seafolk, a protector of the ocean's sacred places. And right now, she was living up to the title. Gyarados, Hyper Beam, Starmie, Psychic, push them back, she commanded, her voice ringing with an authority that cut through the chaos. Her Gyarados, a magnificent, terrifying beast, roared and unleashed a devastating blast of orange energy that carved a trench through the corrupted Pokemon. Her Starmie's central gem glowed with intense psychic power, creating a shimmering blue barrier that held back the slithering, grasping tentacles of a dozen shadow tentacruels. But she was being pushed back. The rift was growing, vomiting more and more creatures into the lake. For every one Gyarados incinerated, 3 more crawled onto the shore. Misty! Ash yelled, skidding to a halt beside her. Her head whipped around, her eyes widening in shock. Ash, what in the world are you doing here? Long story. What's going on? Some kind of tear in reality opened up an hour ago. She yelled over the roar of her Gyarados. It's poisoning the lake, corrupting everything it touches. I've been trying to hold them off, but I can't get close enough to seal it. As she spoke, the rift pulsed violently. The water in the center of the lake bulged upwards, and from it rose a monstrosity. It had the basic shape of a tentacruel, but it was immense, the size of a small island, its tentacles thick as ancient trees. Its body was a mass of shifting shadows, and its two huge, red orbs pulsed with a malevolent light that seemed to suck the very hope from the air. A void spawn. The alpha spark in Ash's chest screamed. It recognized its antithesis. This was a creature of the adversary, a shard of the great unmaking given form. Get back. That thing is on another level. Misty shouted, recalling her Starmie as the creature's psychic pressure shattered its barrier. Ash didn't have a plan. He didn't even have time to think. He just acted. Pikachu, Thunderbolt, he yelled, but the words felt clumsy, slow. The spark inside him surged, not waiting for a command. Instead of a controlled bolt of lightning from Pikachu's cheeks, a torrent of raw, untamed golden energy erupted from Ash himself. It wasn't an attack, it was an uncontrolled detonation of aura. The blast went wide, carving a smoking crater into the beach 50 feet to their left and sending a shockwave that threw both him and Misty off their feet. What was that? Misty cried, pushing herself up, staring at the crater and then at Ash, her eyes wide with disbelief. I don't know, Ash gasped, clutching his chest. The power was a wild animal, and he was losing his grip. He couldn't command his Pokemon like this. The spark was interfering, overwhelming their own energy with its sheer, chaotic volume. The void spawn turned its attention to them, its massive tentacles rising from the water, poised to crush them. Gyarados roared a challenge, but even it looked small before the colossal beast. Desperation was a sharp, cold clarity. He couldn't fight it head on. Arceus's words echoed in his head. Unite what has been scattered. Forge the covenants. He looked at Misty. She was scared, but she wasn't running. Her knuckles were white where she gripped a Pokeball. Her jaw was set. That was her defining trait, the one he'd always known, from the day he stole her bike to now. Her unbreakable, often infuriating, stubborn will. Misty, he shouted, getting to his feet. I can't attack it. This power, it's too wild. But I think I can hold it back. I need you to hit it with everything you've got. Aim for the center of the rift, right below it. She stared at him, 1,000 questions in her eyes, but there was no time. She saw the desperation, the honesty, the sliver of a chance in his voice. She nodded, her trust in him overriding her confusion. You got it. Gyarados, listen to me. I need your biggest dragon rage. Pour all of your anger, all of your strength, into one blast. The great sea serpent seemed to understand. It threw its head back and its throat began to glow with coalescing draconic energy. The void spawn's tentacles lashed out. Now, Ash. Ash didn't think. He reached inside himself, not to the trainer, not to the hero, but to the raw, terrifying core of the alpha spark. He didn't try to shape it into an attack. He just let it be. He spread his arms, and the golden aura exploded from him again, but this time, he gave it a purpose. Protect. It formed a vast, shimmering dome of golden light in front of them, a shield of pure creation. The void spawn's shadowy tentacles slammed into it. The impact was titanic. The shield groaned, cracks appearing in its golden surface, and the strain sent Ash to one knee, blood trickling from his nose. But it held. Behind the shield, Misty's eyes glowed with an almost feral intensity. She wasn't just giving an order. She was channeling her own indomitable spirit, her sheer will, into her Pokemon. Now, Gyarados. With a cataclysmic roar, Gyarados unleashed its power. It wasn't a normal dragon rage. It was a torrent of azure and white energy, a river of focused fury, amplified by its trainer's own life force. The blast shot past Ash's shield and struck the water at the base of the void spawn, hitting the heart of the void rift. For a moment, two absolute forces met. The unmaking void of the rift and the unbending will of Misty and her partner. There was a sound like tearing reality, and then the void spawn let out a silent, psychic scream as its anchor to this world was obliterated. It dissolved, its shadowy form collapsing back into the rift. The rift itself, struck by the pure, life-filled energy of the attack, began to collapse in on itself, shrinking with a deafening implosion. The backlash was immense. A wave of displaced dimensional energy erupted from the closing rift. Ash's shield shattered like glass. The force picked him and Misty up and slammed them together, throwing them back onto the sandy shore in a tangle of limbs. Ash's world went white. The alpha spark in his chest, which had been a raging inferno, suddenly found a conduit. He felt Misty's presence, not just beside him, but inside his mind. Her stubbornness, her fear, her loyalty, her deep, hidden well of kindness. It was a cool, steadying rush of blue, dousing the wild flames of his golden energy. The world came back into focus. He was lying on the sand, Misty practically on top of him, both of them gasping for breath. The lake was calm. The sky was clear. The unnatural cold was gone. And on the back of his right hand, a design was glowing with a soft golden light, a stylized flame. He looked at Misty's right hand, which was lying near his. An identical mark was glowing there, only hers was a deep, oceanic blue. A single, perfect droplet. As they watched, the light faded, leaving behind what looked like faint, silvery tattoos. What was that? Misty breathed, pushing herself up into a sitting position, her face inches from his. She was staring at her hand, then at his. A covenant, Ash said, the word feeling alien on his tongue. He sat up, his head swimming. He could still feel her. A quiet, steady presence in the back of his mind, like a calm harbor in the storm of his new power. The alpha spark was still there, immense and powerful, but it wasn't a wild inferno anymore. It was a controlled burn, anchored by her presence. Misty looked at him, her cerulean eyes searching his. The shock was fading, replaced by a dawning, terrifying understanding. Ash, what's happened to you? Before he could answer, a glint of light from the trees caught his eye. It was a flicker of metal, sunlight on a lens where there should be no sun. It vanished as quickly as it appeared. He had the distinct, chilling sensation that they had been watched. That this entire, impossible event had been recorded. Somewhere far away, in a sterile command center illuminated by the cold light of monitors, a man in a severe, gray uniform watched the satellite feed rewind and play again. He zoomed in on the golden shield, on the blast from the Gyarados, on the flash of light as the two trainers were thrown together. He zoomed in on the glowing marks on their hands. Commander Volkov leaned back in his chair, his face a mask of cold calculation. His second-in-command stood rigidly beside him. Sir, our drones confirm the energy readings are off the scale. It matches the anomaly at Mount Coronet. It's him. Volkov steepled his fingers, his eyes never leaving the screen where the boy, the young man, was helping the orange-haired girl to her feet. Legends. Prophecies. Gods and their chosen. For centuries, humanity has cowered under the whims of these divine forces, treating their destructive battles as mere acts of nature. His voice was calm, measured, but laced with an icy conviction. We built the Aegis Foundation to free humanity from that tyranny. To ensure that our fate is in our own hands. He stood and walked to a large holographic map of the world, where 2 points of light now pulsed, one on Coronet, one at Lake Verity. We don't know what this boy is. We don't know what he wants. But we know he wields a power not meant for mortals. He is not a savior. He is an unknown variable, and variables must be controlled. Or eliminated. He turned to his subordinate, his eyes like chips of flint. The Herald is active. He's already found one of his aspects. Find him. Find out what he is. And find out how to turn his power off. Back at the lake, Ash could feel the last traces of the unseen watcher fading. But the chill remained. The world was fraying. A cosmic horror wanted to erase everything. A divine being had placed the weight of the world on his shoulders. And now, he knew, something human was hunting him, too. He looked at Misty, at the matching mark on her hand, and the new, unnerving psychic connection that hummed between them. This was real. This was happening. His journey to become a Pokemon master had just taken a very, very sharp turn. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. The Aegis and the Will of Hoenn. The silence that followed the chaos at Lake Verity was heavier than any sound. It was a silence filled with unspoken questions and the unnerving hum of a power that now bound Ash and Misty together. They traveled south, away from the prying eyes of the Sinnoh League and towards the warmer shores of Hoenn, not because of a conscious plan, but because the golden spark in Ash's chest pulled them that way, a compass needle seeking its next true north. The bond was strange. It wasn't telepathy, not exactly. It was more a sense of presence, a constant awareness of the other's emotional state. When Misty felt a pang of anxiety, Ash felt a faint echo of it, a subtle disquiet in his own mind. When he felt a surge of determination, she would feel a wave of warmth and resolve wash over her. It was intimate, unnerving, and left little room for secrets. They were sitting by a campfire in a small clearing somewhere in the vast forest south of Sinnoh, the flames casting dancing shadows on their faces. Pikachu was curled up asleep at Ash's feet, while Misty's Politoed was happily splashing in a nearby stream. So, what, bonded? Misty finally asked, breaking the tension that had been simmering for 2 days. She poked the fire with a stick, her blue covenant mark a faint shimmer in the firelight. Destined to save the world. Ash ran a hand through his perpetually messy hair. The golden mark on his own hand felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. That's what Arceus said. It called you the aspect of will. Misty snorted, a ghost of her old, fiery self. Sounds about right. Usually people just call me stubborn. She looked at him, her gaze serious. And you're the Alpha. The herald of creation. It's a lot to take in, Ash. 1 minute I'm dealing with a weird dimensional hole, the next I'm psychically tied to you and on the run from, what, exactly? The adversary, Ash said, the name feeling like ice on his tongue. And whoever was watching us from the trees. That felt human. He didn't need to elaborate. She'd felt his spike of alarm, the cold certainty that they were being hunted. It was their new reality. They weren't just trainers on a journey anymore. They were soldiers in a war they didn't understand, carrying a power that could either save the world or tear them apart from the inside. The pull led them to Hoenn, to the sprawling, technologically advanced metropolis of Rustboro City. It was a jarring transition from the wilderness. The clean, sterile streets were bustling with people, the air filled with the hum of monorails and the chatter of a city focused on progress. The Sparks' call was diffuse here, a general sense of direction rather than a specific point, so they decided to stock up on supplies. It happened in a crowded marketplace. One moment Ash was examining a map, Misty haggling over the price of potions, the next, the ambient noise of the city changed. It was a subtle shift, a high-frequency hum that vibrated in his teeth. The people around them seemed unaffected, but Pikachu's ears flattened, and a wave of sudden, intense nausea washed over Ash through his bond with Misty. Something's wrong, he said, his hand instinctively going to the Pokeball on his belt. Men in sleek, gray uniforms were suddenly all around them. They hadn't run. They had simply been part of the crowd, moving with unnerving coordination. They wore no insignias, but their faces were hard, their movements precise and military. They weren't trainers. They were soldiers. One of them raised a device that looked like a futuristic rifle. He didn't fire a beam or a projectile. He fired a wave of sound. The hum intensified into a piercing shriek that resonated directly with Ash's aura. The alpha spark recoiled like a struck snake. The golden power within him sputtered, and a debilitating weakness flooded his limbs. He staggered, clutching his head as the world swam in a sea of static. Ash! Misty cried out, feeling his agony as a sharp spike of pain behind her own eyes. She reached for her Starmie, but another soldier fired a net woven from crackling, blue energy. It wrapped around her, and she cried out as it sent a paralytic shock through her system, just strong enough to disable, not to injure. Target Alpha is suppressed. One of the soldiers called out, his voice flat and professional. Aspect secure. Move in for containment. They were closing in, their movements economical, their faces impassive. This was an ambush. Precise, technological, and terrifyingly effective. They had weapons designed to fight him. But they had made one critical mistake. They had suppressed his divine power, but in doing so, they had momentarily untethered him from its wild, uncontrollable nature. They had left him as just Ash Ketchum. And Ash Ketchum was a fighter. Gritting his teeth against the pain, he forced his eyes open. He saw the energy net around Misty, the power pack on the back of the soldier holding the launcher. He saw the sonic emitter aimed at him, its power cell glowing. He saw Pikachu, shaking off the disorientation, its cheeks sparking with rage. There was no time for a grand strategy. Just instinct. Pikachu, quick attack on the net's power pack. Don't hit Misty. Pikachu was a yellow blur. It moved with a speed born of 1,000 battles, a low-slung missile of fur and fury. The soldier holding the net launcher didn't even have time to react. Pikachu slammed headfirst into the power pack. It exploded in a shower of sparks and a fizzle of energy, and the net fell harmlessly from Misty's shoulders. The soldier with the sonic weapon swung it towards Pikachu. No you don't. Ash snarled. He couldn't use his aura, but he could still move. He dove forward, not at the soldier, but at a fruit vendor's cart laden with Oron berries. He upended the entire cart, sending a cascade of rolling, blue berries across the pavement. The soldiers, for all their training, were momentarily thrown. Their precise formations faltered on the unstable footing. The one aiming at Pikachu slipped, the sonic beam going wide and blasting a hole in a nearby storefront. Misty, now! Ash yelled. Misty was already moving, her will overriding the residual shock. Starmie, go! Water pulse, spread it out. Her Starmie emerged from its ball, spinning rapidly. It unleashed not a focused blast, but a wide, disorienting wave of concentric rings of water. It wasn't meant to cause damage. It was chaos. The wave slicked the berry-strewn ground, turning the entire plaza into a treacherous mess. The gray-clad soldiers slipped and slid, their high-tech gear and disciplined training rendered useless by a simple combination of fruit and water. They were already running, disappearing into the bewildered crowd as the first of Rustborough's security forces arrived to investigate the commotion. They didn't stop until they were deep in the Petalburg woods, their hearts pounding, the phantom hum of the sonic weapon still ringing in their ears. Aegis, Misty said, leaning against a tree to catch her breath. The news reports called them the Aegis Foundation, a private security firm specializing in containing Pokemon-related disasters. They weren't containing a disaster. They were hunting us, Ash said grimly. The casual, terrifying efficiency of the attack had shaken him. They knew what we were. They called us Alpha and Aspect. He looked at his hands. For the first time, he truly understood what Arceus meant. The spark wasn't just a gift. It was a target. And not just for the creatures of the void. To some people, he was the disaster that needed containing. The feeling returned then, stronger and more insistent than ever. The pull of the next aspect. It led them east, away from the cities, towards the ash-covered slopes of Mt. Chimney. It led them to Fallarbor Town. The town was abuzz with excitement for an unofficial Pokemon contest, but there was a dark undercurrent to the festive atmosphere. Ash and Misty heard the whispers as soon as they arrived. Pokemon were falling ill. Healthy, powerful Pokemon were suddenly becoming sluggish, unresponsive, their inner fire dimming into a dull, listless apathy. The spark led them to the outskirts of the contest hall, where a small crowd was gathered. In the center of it, a young woman with a familiar red bandana was kneeling beside a magnificent Blaziken. May. She looked older, more confident, her time as a top coordinator having sharpened her into a poised and charismatic presence. But right now, her face was etched with worry. Her Blaziken, normally a proud warrior of brilliant flame, was slumped against her, its head flames barely a flicker. Its eyes were glazed over with a strange, violet sheen. He was fine this morning, May was saying, her voice tight with distress. We were just practicing his fire spin, and he just collapsed. Ash felt a cold dread creep up his spine. The violet sheen in Blaziken's eyes, it was the same cold, empty light he'd seen in the eyes of the shadow Pokemon on Mount Coronet. It was a corruption, but a different kind. Slower. More insidious. He and Misty pushed through the crowd. May. Ash called out. Her head shot up, her eyes widening. Ash. Misty. What are you doing in Hoenn? We could ask you the same thing, Misty said, her gaze fixed on the ailing Blaziken. What happened to him? Before May could answer, a man in a crisp, official-looking contest judge uniform stepped forward. He had a clipboard and an overly sympathetic smile. A terrible shame, he said, his voice smooth. This strange ailment seems to be spreading. We're doing all we can. Perhaps it would be best if we took the Blaziken to our temporary care facility for observation. The alpha spark in Ash's chest flared with a sudden, intense cold. It wasn't a reaction to the sickness. It was a reaction to the man. Ash could feel a subtle wrongness about him, a void where his life force should be. He was a hollow shell. No, Ash said, his voice flat. He stepped between the man and May. We'll take care of him. The man's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. I must insist. It's for the safety of the other contestants. He's not contagious, Ash stated. It wasn't a guess. It was a certainty that came from the spark. He could feel it. The sickness wasn't a virus. It was a poison, a tiny shard of the adversary's power, designed to snuff out a Pokemon's spirit. Someone is doing this deliberately. The judge's facade finally cracked. He took a step back, his hand inching towards his belt. It was the same gray uniform pants Ash had seen on the soldiers in Rustboro. He was Aegis. This whole contest, this sickness, it was a trap. A laboratory to test their new weapon. At that moment, Blaziken's head snapped up. Its eyes were no longer just glazed, they were burning with a solid, malevolent violet. It let out a guttural cry that was pure rage and lunged, not at the Aegis operative, but at the person closest to it. It lunged at May. May, look out, Misty yelled. May stumbled back, crying out in shock and horror as her own Pokemon, her first partner, swiped at her with claws wreathed in shadowy flames. She was frozen, her heart breaking. Ash didn't hesitate. He wasn't going to make the same mistake he'd made at the lake. He couldn't just unleash the spark. He had to control it. He reached inside, not to the overwhelming power of Arceus, but to his own core, to the bond he shared with every Pokemon he'd ever trained. He saw Misty out of the corner of his eye, her Starmie already moving to intercept Blaziken with a psychic barrier. He saw the Aegis operative reaching for a device on his belt. Misty, the operative, don't let him get away. Ash commanded. He then focused his entire being on May and Blaziken. He placed his hand on May's shoulder. May, don't look at what it is now. Remember what it was. Remember your bond. The alpha spark surged, but this time, he channeled it. He didn't push it at Blaziken. He pushed it into May. He channeled his own unbreakable belief in the connection between a trainer and their Pokemon, amplifying her own feelings, her own spirit. May gasped as a wave of golden warmth flooded her. The terror and despair were washed away, replaced by a surge of fiery energy. The memories hit her like a physical blow. A tiny, nervous Torchic pecking at her hand. A proud Combusken winning its first ribbon. A mighty Blaziken standing with her on the grand festival stage. The love, the ambition, the shared passion of their journey together. That was her aspect. That was her power. Blaziken, she screamed, her voice no longer trembling with fear, but ringing with absolute conviction. I'm here. I'm with you. Fight it. Blaziken faltered in its attack, its head twitching. The violet in its eyes swirled, warring with the faint, returning glimmer of its true self. May's passionate bond, supercharged by Ash's spark, was a lifeline, a beacon in the suffocating darkness of the corruption. Blaziken let out a pained cry, clutching its own head. It needed one final push. Ash, its flame. May yelled, her mind racing with a coordinator's strategic brilliance. The source of its power. We have to reignite it. Ash understood. He held out his hand, not towards Blaziken, but towards the faint, flickering flames on its wrists. He focused the alpha spark into a single, pure point of creation energy. It wasn't an attack. It was an offering. A spark to light a fire. The golden energy touched the flickering embers. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a sound like a forge igniting, Blaziken's flames erupted, not the shadowy purple of the corruption, but a brilliant, clean, defiant crimson. The flames washed over its own body, a self-immolation that burned away the sickness. The violet light in its eyes shattered and dissolved, leaving only its loyal, familiar gaze. With a weary groan, the great Pokemon collapsed, exhausted but free, its head landing softly in May's lap. The backlash hit Ash like a physical blow. The act of channeling and igniting another's spirit sent a shockwave of energy through him. He stumbled back, right into Misty, who grabbed him to keep him from falling. And then, the light. It erupted from Ash, a column of pure gold. It split, one beam connecting to the blue aura of will that was Misty, the other connecting to the fiery red aura of passion that was May. For a heartbeat, the three of them were one, a trinity of power that made the very air sing. Ash felt the second anchor lock into place in his mind. May's passionate, ambitious spirit joined Misty's unbending will, further stabilizing the raging fire within him. The world snapped into focus with an even greater clarity. A new covenant was forged. On May's hand, a red, flame-like mark glowed for a moment before settling into a silvery tattoo, a perfect match to the marks on Ash and Misty. She stared at it, then at them, her mind reeling as a fraction of understanding. The weight, the destiny, the connection, flowed into her through the new bond. The Aegis operative, forgotten in the drama, stared in horror. His simple experiment had turned into a divine spectacle. Misty's Starmie had him pinned with a psychic attack, his high-tech gear crushed and useless. He had failed. Far away, Commander Volkov watched the new drone footage on his main screen. The energy signature had tripled. The boy hadn't just defeated their bio-weapon, he had consumed it, used it, and forged another link in his impossible chain. He's not just a vessel, Volkov breathed, a sliver of genuine fear piercing his cold logic. He's an amplifier. He's uniting them, making them stronger. This is worse than we thought. He turned to his analyst. The data from the Dragonspiral Tower incident in Unova. The reports of a man wielding a power that negates aura. The one they called the Omega's vessel. Sir, that file is flagged as a mythological level threat. Engaging him would be. The enemy of our enemy is our only hope, Volkov interrupted, his voice like ice. If we cannot turn Ash Ketchum's power off, we will find the one being in existence who can. Find him. Make contact. Tell him we have a common enemy. On the ground in Fall Arbor, Ash looked from Misty to a wide-eyed May, feeling their distinct presences in his mind. A pragmatic, steady blue. A fiery, passionate red. And his own golden flame at the center. His family of destiny was growing. And so was the list of his enemies. Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. The Politics of Knowledge. The sea voyage from Hoenn to Sinnoh was a crucible for their new reality. The bond, the tri-fold covenant linking Ash, Misty, and May, was no longer just a strange new sense. It was a living, breathing thing, a constant, low-level telepathic hum that connected their minds. They learned to navigate it, building mental walls for privacy and opening channels for seamless communication. In training battles, it was a devastating advantage. Ash wouldn't need to shout a command. He'd simply think a strategy, and Misty's Gyarados would adjust its aim as May's Blaziken created the perfect opening, their actions flowing together in a symphony of unspoken understanding. But it was the quiet moments that were the most profound. Ash would be staring at the endless blue of the ocean, the weight of his destiny a cold stone in his gut, and he'd suddenly feel a wave of Misty's stubborn resolve wash over him, followed by a surge of May's bright, fiery optimism. They were his anchors in every sense of the word, keeping the raging golden sea of the alpha spark from drowning him. In turn, they felt his unwavering determination, a force so powerful it became the bedrock of their own courage. They weren't just following him, they were part of him, and the journey had become their own. The spark's pull was clearer now, more refined. It guided them past the battle frontier and towards the heart of Sinnoh, to Hearthome City. It was a call that felt different from the others. It didn't sing with will or burn with passion. It was a clear, bright note, like a crystal bell ringing in the distance, a note of intellect, of insight, of unwavering hope. Hearthome was a city of contrasts, where ancient myths and modern fashion coexisted on cobblestone streets. But as they disembarked, the atmosphere felt wrong. The city's usual warmth was replaced by a palpable tension. People cast furtive glances at them. Hollow screens on the sides of buildings displayed news tickers that made Ash's blood run cold. Unidentified energy phenomena continue to plague the region. Champion Cynthia urges caution. Sources suggest a link to the rogue trainer Ash Ketchum. Rogue trainer. Misty spat, her hands balling into fists. They're blaming you for the rifts. It makes a twisted kind of sense, May mused, her brow furrowed in thought. Aegis couldn't capture us, so they've decided to poison the well. Turn the world against us. The pull of the spark led them directly to the magnificent Hearthome contest hall, but the feeling was muted, contained. Ash tried his Pokegirl. No answer from Dawn. He tried the local Pokemon Center's public line to her home in Twinleaf. Her mother answered, her voice fraught with worry. Oh, Ash, thank goodness. I was so worried. Dawn, she was invited to Hearthome by the League a few days ago. Something about a special research conference with the champion. But I haven't heard from her since. They said she's under their protection. Under protection. The words were a euphemism, and they all knew it. She was being held. Aegis hadn't just fed the League misinformation. They had used Ash's own history, his own friendships, against him. They knew who he would seek out. They had turned the Sinnoh League into a gilded cage for their next target. They're not going to get away with this, Ash said, his voice dangerously quiet. The spark flared in his chest, not with wild energy, but with a cold, focused anger. He could feel the Sinnoh League headquarters on the other side of the city, a bastion of stone and authority. And inside, he could feel the clear, bright note of the third aspect, a beacon of hope trapped behind walls of manipulated justice. So what's the plan? Misty asked, crossing her arms. We can't exactly knock on the front door and ask them to release our friend who they think is your accomplice in almost destroying the world. We won't knock, Ash replied, his eyes fixed on the distant silhouette of the League building. We're going to walk in, find Dawn, and have a little talk with the champion. Infiltrating the Sinnoh League headquarters was supposed to be impossible. It was a modern fortress, equipped with motion sensors, aura scanners, and staffed by elite trainers. But Aegis and the League had prepared for a frontal assault, for a battle. They hadn't prepared for the silent, coordinated efficiency of the Covenants. They waited until the dead of night, when the city was draped in shadow and silence. Their approach was a masterpiece of stealth. Ash took the lead, the Alpha Spark no longer just a source of power, but a hypersensitive detection tool. He could feel the building's security grid, the faint hum of the cameras, the life auras of the guards patrolling the corridors. He guided them through the blind spots, a ghost in the machine. A locked door stood in their way. May held up a hand, a slight smile on her lips. It's my turn, she projected through the bond, a thought tinged with the thrill of performance. She sent out her munchlax. Not for a battle, but for its incredible appetite. A few carefully offered poffins later, and the Pokémon was happily dismantling the door's electronic lock with a combination of delicate nibbling and sheer brute force, its senses honed to find the tasty electrical currents within. The lock fizzled and died with a quiet click. Inside, the corridors were sterile and silent. A guard rounded a corner, his Luxray padding silently beside him. There was no time to hide. Misty reacted instantly. Ash, create a diversion. Left corridor. Ash didn't need words. He focused a tiny sliver of his aura, just enough to mimic the psychic signature of a lost Abra, and bounced it off the far wall of the intersecting hallway. The Luxray's ears perked up, its X-ray vision seeing the faint energy signature. It growled, alerting its trainer, who immediately moved to investigate the anomaly. The moment they were gone, the three of them slipped past, their movements as one. They found Dawn not in a cell, but in a comfortable suite of rooms high in the central tower. It was luxurious, but the reinforced door and the guards outside made its true nature clear. She wasn't a guest. She was a prisoner. She was also not idle. The room was covered in printouts from galactic mythology, historical texts, and energy readings she had somehow managed to get access to. She was cross-referencing Aegis's public statements with known data on dimensional instability. She was fighting back with the one weapon they couldn't take from her, her knowledge. When they slipped in through the balcony, having scaled the outer wall with help from Ash's newly discovered ability to create small, temporary aura holds in the stone, she didn't scream. She looked up from her computer, a slow smile spreading across her face. I knew you'd come, she said, her voice a relieved whisper. I knew you wouldn't just let them do this. No need to worry. I was just about to figure out a way to broadcast their falsified data logs to the entire Sinnoh news network. Ash felt a surge of pride. This was the aspect of knowledge and hope. Not just smart, but proactive. Unbreakable. We're getting you out of here, Dawn, May said. No, Dawn replied, shaking her head. Getting me out isn't enough. They've convinced Cynthia. As long as the champion of the Sinnoh League believes Ash is a threat, we'll be fugitives forever. We have to convince her. We have to show her the truth. A heavy, authoritative knock echoed from the door. Miss Dawn. The champion is here to see you. Their eyes met. The choice was made. This was it. The confrontation. The door opened, and Champion Cynthia stepped inside. She was as regal and imposing as ever, her long blonde hair framing a face that was calm, intelligent, and currently shadowed with concern. Her Garchomp stood behind her, a silent, powerful sentinel. Her eyes swept the room, taking in Ash, Misty, and May without a flicker of surprise. "I thought you might be here, Ash," she said, her voice even. "My guards reported a series of minor, inexplicable system glitches. It had a certain style to it." "Cynthia, you have to listen," Ash began, stepping forward. "Aegis is lying to you. They're the ones causing the rifts, or at least making them worse. They're framing me. I have seen their data," Cynthia countered, her gaze unwavering. "Energy readings from the rifts that bear a striking similarity to the signature you gave off during the Alamos Town incident. They have provided compelling evidence that your presence is an accelerant, a catalyst for these disasters." "Evidence can be fabricated," Dawn interjected, stepping beside Ash. "Their data logs are looped. They're taking a single energy signature and projecting it onto every new event. It's a lie, Cynthia, a very clever and technologically sophisticated one." Cynthia looked at Dawn, a flicker of doubt in her eyes. She respected the young coordinator's intellect. "And what evidence do you have to the contrary? All I see is a young man who has always been at the center of world-threatening events, now wielding a power none of us can comprehend, gathering his old friends to his side. Forgive me if my first priority is the safety of my region." This was the heart of it. A battle of words, of data versus truth. Arguing would get them nowhere. Ash knew, with the certainty of the spark, that there was only one way. He had to show, not tell. "I can't give you data, Cynthia," Ash said, his voice dropping, drawing her full attention. "But I can show you the truth." He held out his right hand, palm up. The golden flame of his covenant mark pulsed with a soft, inner light. "This is the Alpha Spark. A piece of Arceus's power. It was given to me to seal the rifts, not cause them. But it's too strong for one person. It needs to be anchored." He looked at Misty, then at May. They stepped forward, holding out their own hands, the blue droplet and the red flame glowing in response. "This is a covenant," Ash explained. "A bond that unites us, stabilizes the power, and helps us fight the real enemy, a force of pure nothingness called the adversary. Aegis doesn't want to save the world. They want my power, and they're willing to let the world burn to get it." Cynthia stared at their hands, her analytical mind trying to process what she was seeing. It was a beautiful, impossible sight. "A bond. Let me show you," Ash said softly. "You've studied the myths. You know the power of aura and spirit better than anyone. Please, trust me one more time." He took a step closer. Garchomp let out a low growl, moving to intercept. "It's all right, Garchomp," Cynthia murmured, her eyes locked on Ash's. She saw no malice in him, only a desperate, profound sincerity. She gave a slow, deliberate nod. Ash gently took her hand, placing her palm over his own covenant mark. And he let her in. He didn't show her everything, just a glimpse. He shared the feeling of the spark, the agonizing weight of creation. He let her feel the cold, soul-crushing despair of the adversary's void. He let her feel the unbending will of Misty and the fiery passion of May as they anchored his own spirit. He showed her the truth, not as a story, but as a sensation, an undeniable reality that bypassed logic and went straight to the soul. Cynthia gasped, her eyes widening as the visions and feelings flooded her. Her hand trembled. She saw it all. The fraying world, the divine burden, the lies of Aegis. She pulled her hand back as if burned, her composure finally cracking. She looked at Ash, not as a rogue trainer, but as a young man carrying a weight no one should ever have to bear. I see," she whispered, her voice filled with awe and horror. "By the gods, what have I?" Before she could finish, the entire building shuddered violently. A piercing alarm began to blare. Red emergency lights bathed the room in a hellish glow. On a large hollow screen on Cynthia's wall, which had been showing a tranquil image of Mount Coronet, the feed switched to a security camera view of the room they were in. The smiling face of Commander Volkov appeared in a corner of the screen. "A touching reunion, champion," his voice echoed, cold and smug. "And thank you, Herald. Your little demonstration has confirmed our theories about the nature of the Covenant bond. Your emotional state acts as a conduit. We predicted you would succeed in convincing her. You are, after all, dangerously charismatic. Volkov, what have you done? Cynthia demanded, her voice regaining its iron authority. We have simply accelerated the timetable, Volkov replied. Since you have chosen to side with the anomaly, we will be forced to solve two problems at once. The air in the center of the room began to shimmer and tear. A sound like grinding glass filled the space as a void rift, black and jagged, was ripped open inside the penthouse suite. Shadow Pokemon, Skuntanks and Toxicroaks, began to pour out, their eyes glowing with that familiar violet madness. Simultaneously, the windows of the suite shattered inwards, and Aegis soldiers in advanced armor rappelled into the room, their sonic rifles already whining to life. The trap wasn't to keep Dawn in, May realized with a gasp. It was to lure us here. Aegis forces are storming the building. A voice yelled from Cynthia's comms. Volkov's face remained on the screen, a picture of calm control. Neutralize the aspects. Contain the Herald. And Champion, try not to damage my equipment. His image vanished. Cynthia didn't waste a second. Garchomp, Dragon Rush, she commanded. Her ace Pokemon became a blur of blue and red energy, smashing through the Aegis soldiers with overwhelming force. Misty and May were already in motion. Gyarados, let's go. Blaziken, Blaze. The two powerful Pokemon materialized, their battle cries joining the cacophony. A hyper beam from Gyarados met a hail of sonic blasts, while Blaziken's flare blitz turned the shadow Pokemon to ash. It was chaos. Ash felt the sonic weapons trying to disrupt his spark, but with two covenants anchoring him, the effect was lessened, reduced to a dull headache. He saw the rift, pulsing and unstable, and knew it was the source of the problem. But something was holding it open, an artificial anchor. Dawn, the rift, he yelled over the din. Something's keeping it from collapsing. Dawn, protected by her Piplup's brave bubble beam, wasn't panicking. Her mind was racing, her eyes scanning every detail of the rift, the technology of the Aegis soldiers, the energy fluctuations. She was the aspect of knowledge. This was her battlefield. Their armor. She shouted, pointing. There's a device on the lead soldier's back. It's emitting a frequency that's stabilizing the dimensional tier. It's not a weapon. It's an anchor. Cynthia, fending off two soldiers with her Garchomp, heard her. Ash, we need to take out that anchor. The lead soldier was heavily protected, surrounded by his squad and a wall of shadow Pokemon. A brute force attack was too risky. Ash, Misty, and May locked eyes. No words were needed. Pincer, on my mark, Ash projected. May, high, Misty, low, I'll take the center. Blaziken leapt, its leg strength carrying it onto the ceiling, where it clung like a fiery gargoyle. Gyarados coiled, its massive body a blue battering ram. Ash took a deep breath, and for the first time, drew on the power of the unified covenants. Now, Blaziken unleashed a devastating blaze kick from above. Gyarados charged forward with a tidal wave of aqua tail from below. And Ash, flanked by Pikachu, unleashed a pure, concentrated beam of golden aura straight down the middle. It was a perfect, tri-pronged assault. The Aegis squad, unable to defend from three directions at once, broke. The lead soldier was slammed by Ash's aura beam, his armor cracking, the anchor device on his back exploding in a shower of sparks. The moment the anchor was destroyed, the void rift began to collapse violently. But as it imploded, it unleashed a final, desperate wave of void energy. Dawn, closest to the epicenter, was thrown from her feet. Ash moved on pure instinct. He leapt forward, grabbing her, pulling her into him and shielding her with his own body as the wave of uncreation washed over them. And in that moment of pure, selfless protection, the third covenant formed. A light, brilliant and clear as a diamond, erupted from Ash, Misty, and May. It flowed into Dawn, whose own hopeful, intelligent aura flared to meet it. The room was filled with an incandescent white light that vaporized the last of the shadow Pokemon and sent the remaining Aegis soldiers reeling, their senses overloaded. Ash felt the third anchor lock into place. Dawn's mind, sharp and clear. Her spirit, a beacon of unshakable hope. His power, once a raging fire stabilized by will and passion, now gained focus. He could see the world not just as energy and life, but as patterns, as data, as interconnected threads of destiny. The fraying of the world was no longer just a feeling, it was a complex equation he could almost begin to understand. When the light faded, they were all standing. On Dawn's hand, a new covenant mark glowed with a pure white light shaped like a radiant star, before settling into its permanent, silvery sheen. In his hidden command center, Commander Volkov watched the energy readings on his monitor spike to an impossible level before the drone transmitting the feed was obliterated. The screen went to static. He wasn't angry. He wasn't even disappointed. He was satisfied. He turned to his lead scientist. Did you get it? The scientist pushed his glasses up his nose, his eyes wide with a mixture of terror and excitement. Yes, sir. A direct, close-range, high-resolution scan of the Alpha Sparks energy matrix, amplified and harmonized by 3 active covenants. The data is beautiful. It's more than we could have ever hoped for. Volkov allowed himself a thin, cold smile. He looked at the schematics for a new weapon on the main screen, currently codenamed Project Null Cannon. Excellent, he said. Now, we build the weapon to kill a god. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. The Adversary's Mercy. They left Sinnoh under the official protection of its champion. Cynthia, now a staunch and powerful ally, used her authority to quell the media frenzy, reframing Ash not as a rogue but as a specialist, working with the League to investigate the dimensional anomalies. It was a flimsy shield, a political maneuver that bought them time but did little to hide them from the 2 sets of eyes they knew were watching: the cold, calculating gaze of the Aegis Foundation and the suffocating, empty stare of the adversary. With 4 of them now bound by the covenants, their silent communication had evolved into a complex and beautiful symphony. Ash was the conductor, the central melody, but the others were distinct and vital movements. Misty was the driving, powerful rhythm of will. May was the soaring, vibrant harmony of passion. Dawn was the intricate, clever counterpoint of knowledge and hope. In battle, they were a single entity, their Pokemon moving with a predictive grace that seemed to defy reality. Ash would feel an opening, May's Blaziken would exploit it, Misty's Gyarados would provide cover, and Dawn's Mamoswine would deliver the final, calculated blow, all without a single word being spoken. The journey to Unova was marked by this newfound unity, but also by a creeping dread. Ash could feel another presence on the psychic landscape of the world. It wasn't the raw, chaotic hunger of a void rift. This was something different. It was a cold, sharp, and horrifyingly intelligent presence. It felt like his own spark, but inverted, a focused, deliberate nothingness. It was an omega to his alpha. The pull of the next covenant led them to the ancient, crumbling spire that pierced the uneven sky, the Dragonspiral Tower. It was a place of myth, said to be the cradle of dragons and the site where the legendary Reshiram and Zekrom once slumbered. As they approached, the air grew still, heavy with an unnatural silence. The usual chirping of Pidove and the rustling of wild Pokemon were gone. There was only the low moan of the wind through the ancient stones. At the pinnacle of the tower, on the highest, wind-scoured platform, a figure was waiting. He stood with his back to them, looking out over the vast expanse of Unova. He was tall and lean, dressed in simple, dark traveling clothes. Standing beside him was a Hydreigon, its 3 heads surveying the landscape with an unnerving stillness. But it was the Pokemon lying at the man's feet that made Ash's blood run cold. It was a Haxorus, its powerful, axe-like tusks chipped and dull. Its body was covered in the telltale violet cracks of a shadow infection, but something else was happening. A gentle, silvery light was emanating from the man's outstretched hand, which hovered just above the Haxorus's head. Where the light touched the corruption, the violet cracks didn't heal, they simply dissolved. The Haxorus itself was slowly, peacefully disintegrating, turning into motes of shimmering dust that were carried away on the wind. It wasn't a violent end. It was a quiet, serene erasure. The man turned as they approached, and his face was not that of a monster. He looked young, perhaps only a few years older than Ash, with kind, empathetic eyes and a calm, gentle smile. But behind that smile, Ash's spark felt a void so profound it was like staring into the abyss between stars. The herald of creation, the man said, his voice soft and melodic. And his aspects. I have been watching your journey. My name is Silas. You're the one, Ash said, his hand already on Pikachu's Pokeball. He could feel it. This was the cold presence, the Omega. The one serving the adversary. Silas's smile didn't falter. It was filled with a sad, paternal pity that was more infuriating than any sneer. Serving. No. I am a partner. A believer. The adversary does not desire destruction, Herald. It offers mercy. He gestured to the fading motes of what was once the Haxorus. This creature was in pain. Its spirit was twisted into a weapon of pure rage. I offered it peace. A gentle return to the silence. Is that not an act of kindness? You call erasing it kindness? May shot back, her voice ringing with passionate disbelief. Her Blaziken stepped forward, its flames flaring in agitation. What is life but a prelude to suffering? Silas countered, his calm gaze sweeping over them. It is a chaotic, flawed, and painful accident. You run across the world, trying to patch a sinking ship, Herald. You seal one rift, and another opens. You save one Pokemon, and 1,000 more fall into shadow. You are delaying the inevitable. I am offering the passengers a peaceful end before the ship tears itself apart. This was his weapon. Not just power, but ideology. He didn't fight with rage. He sought to dismantle their will with his calm, terrifyingly reasonable sounding despair. The world is worth fighting for, Ash stated, his voice a low growl. The pain, the struggle, that's part of it. But so is the joy, the connection, the love. You don't get to decide it's not worth it for everyone else. Don't I? Silas tilted his head. The adversary chose me, just as Arceus chose you. It gave me the Omega's kiss, the power to unmake. Perhaps my purpose is to correct the Creator's single, great mistake. This was it. The first true battle of their war. It wasn't against a mindless beast from a rift, or against human soldiers with technology. This was a god versus a god, an alpha versus an omega. Pikachu, let's go, Ash yelled. The battle that followed was unlike any Ash had ever fought. Silas's Hydreigon was powerful, its dark pulses and dragon breaths tearing chunks from the ancient stone of the tower. But it was Silas himself who was the true threat. Pikachu launched a full-power Volt Tackle, a blazing comet of electrical energy. As it neared Silas, he simply raised a hand. A wave of silvery, negative energy washed over the attack. The Volt Tackle didn't explode or deflect. It just unraveled. The lightning dissipated, the momentum vanished, and Pikachu was thrown back, landing hard on the stone, its own energy reserves feeling strangely depleted. Your power is connection, Herald, Silas explained calmly as his Hydreigon pinned down May's Blaziken and Misty's Gyarados. It builds, it strengthens, it creates. Mine does the opposite. I am the unraveling. I am the end of the bond. He demonstrated again. Dawn's Mamoswine charged, intending to use Ice Shard. Silas made a small, dismissive gesture. The bond between Dawn and her Mamoswine flickered. For a split second, the Pokemon forgot its command, its charge faltering in confusion, just long enough for the Hydreigon to knock it aside with a brutal dragon tail. He was severing the connections. He was turning their greatest strength into their most profound weakness. He wasn't just defeating their Pokemon, he was defeating their very philosophy. Ash felt a cold knot of fear in his stomach. He was outmatched. This man, this vessel of the void, was stronger. He'd had his power longer, understood it better. The combined might of the four covenants was being systematically dismantled by a single, quiet man who looked at them with sorrowful eyes. Suddenly, a wild, furious roar echoed from below. A figure swung into view, climbing the tower's crumbling facade with the speed and agility of a wild Pokemon. She had long, untamed purple hair that flew behind her like a banner, and her dark eyes burned with a primal fire. She landed on the platform in a crouch, a powerful Haxorus appearing at her side in a flash of light. Iris. I knew I felt something rotten up here, she declared, pointing an accusatory finger at Silas. You talk about peace, but your power feels like the silence of a grave. She hadn't been drawn by the covenant. She had been drawn by instinct. As a child of the Dragon Village, raised among the most primal and powerful of Pokemon, her senses were attuned to the life force of the world itself. And she sensed Silas's power for what it was, an utter and complete lie. That was her aspect, the one Ash's spark had been seeking. Not just the wildness of instinct, but the ability to see the unvarnished truth. Another aspect, Silas sighed, a flicker of annoyance crossing his calm features. The wildness of instinct. A shame. It is the most painful of all sensations to unmake. You're not unmaking anything today. Iris yelled. Haxorus, dragon dance. Let's show him what real power looks like. Iris and her Haxorus moved as one, a whirlwind of draconic fury. Her arrival was the shock to the system they needed, breaking Silas's oppressive rhythm. But he was still too strong. He focused his attention on this new, more aggressive threat. His Hydreigon met Haxorus's assault, a chaotic battle of dragons that sent shockwaves across the tower's peak. Silas saw his opening. While the others were occupied, he turned his full attention to Ash. It is time to end this, Herald. He raised his hand, and a sphere of concentrated silver and black energy formed in his palm. It was a perfect void, a miniature black hole that drank the light around it. An Omega Pulse. This will not kill you, Silas said, his voice still gentle. It will simply disconnect you. It will sever you from the spark, from your friends, from your destiny. You will be just a boy again. You will be free. Ash felt a terror he had never known. The pulse was aimed at his heart, at the very core of the alpha spark. He could feel it pulling at him, promising an end to the weight, the responsibility, the fear. It was a tempting, poisonous lullaby. He raised a shield of golden aura, but he knew it wouldn't be enough. He had seen what Silas's power did. His shield would just unravel. He was going to lose. At that moment, Iris's Haxorus was thrown back by the Hydreigon, crashing to the ground near Ash. Iris cried out, rushing to her partner's side. She looked up and saw the Omega Pulse in Silas's hand, the look of grim acceptance on Ash's face. Her eyes blazed. The truth she saw was simple and absolute. Ash could not fall. Not here. Not now. Silas launched the attack. Ash braced for the end. But Iris moved. She didn't have a plan. She didn't have a strategy. She acted on pure, primal instinct. She slammed her hand onto Ash's chest, right over the alpha spark, and yelled, "No." It wasn't a word. It was a roar of defiance against the void. It was the untamed life force of the world itself refusing to be silenced. Ash had a choice. He could let his shield unravel. Or he could do something reckless, something stupid, something utterly and completely him. He dropped the shield. And as Iris's hand made contact, he didn't try to contain the spark. He released it, forcing the connection, completing the covenant not with a gentle joining, but with a desperate, explosive detonation. The Omega Pulse struck. But it didn't hit a boy from Pallet Town. It hit the combined, untamed, cataclysmic power of the Alpha Spark and the aspect of instinct. The explosion of power was absolute. It wasn't gold or silver. It was a sunburst of pure, unrestrained life. The Omega Pulse didn't just unravel. It was obliterated, overwhelmed by a raw, chaotic vitality that was its complete antithesis. The shockwave tore across the top of the tower, sending everyone, Misty, May, Dawn, Iris, and their Pokémon, flying. Silas was thrown back, his arm burned, his calm facade finally shattering into a look of pure shock. He had touched a power that wasn't ordered or controlled. It was wild. It was truth. It was the roar of a newborn world, and it had hurt him. He clutched his arm, his eyes wide with disbelief. You choose this pain. This chaos. He looked at Ash, who was now surrounded by a maelstrom of golden and wild purple energy. He looked at Iris, who was now linked to him, another anchor in his soul. Silas gritted his teeth, not in pain, but in frustration. He had miscalculated. You only delay the inevitable peace, Alpha, he snarled, the gentleness in his voice finally gone, replaced by a cold fury. Enjoy your bonds while they last. I will enjoy breaking them. He recalled his Hydreigon, and with a final, hateful glare, he leapt from the edge of the tower, a swirl of shadows catching him and carrying him away into the gray sky. Ash collapsed to his knees, the wild energy receding, leaving him shaking and utterly spent. He looked at his friends, all of them battered but safe. He looked at Iris, who was staring at the new, silvery covenant mark on her hand, a stylized dragon's claw. He had won. He had forged the fourth covenant. But the victory felt hollow. Because deep down, in the quiet moments of the fight before Iris had arrived, he knew the truth. He had been losing. Silas was stronger. And Ash had no idea how he was going to beat him when he came back. Meanwhile, in a sterile Aegis laboratory, the final components of a massive, ring-shaped cannon were being locked into place. Commander Volkov stood on a viewing platform, watching the weapon's core begin to glow with a faint, disturbing light, its frequency calibrated to the precise matrix of the data they had stolen from Cynthia's office. Status report, he said, his voice flat. Null cannon is online, Commander, an engineer reported. Power core is stable. We are ready for testing. Volkov stared at the weapon, his reflection visible in the polished metal. Good, he said. The gods of this world have had their time. Now, we build their end. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. The Heart of Kalos. The sea passage to Kalos was a long, contemplative journey over waters far too calm for the storm raging inside Ash Ketchum. The victory at Dragonspiral Tower was a scar, not a trophy. He had felt the crushing weight of Silas's power, the chilling certainty of his own defeat in those final moments. He had only won through a desperate, last-second gamble and Iris's raw, untamed defiance. It wasn't a strategy he could count on again. He spent hours at the ship's railing, staring at the horizon, the sea spray cool on his face. He was quiet, withdrawn. The constant, vibrant symphony of the four covenants in his mind was a stark reminder of what he stood to lose, what he had to protect. The girls felt his brooding as a subtle, persistent chill, a shadow dimming the bright connection that bound them. One evening, as the setting sun painted the clouds in hues of orange and violet, they finally cornered him. Okay, that's it, Misty said, her arms crossed, her expression a mixture of impatience and genuine concern. She planted herself in front of him, blocking his view of the ocean. You've been quiet for days. We can all feel it. It's like a constant Gengar in the room. Spill it, Ash. I'm fine, he mumbled, the lie so thin it was transparent. No, you're not, May countered gently, coming to stand beside Misty. We were there, Ash. We saw what happened. But we won. We're all safe. He was stronger than me, Ash said, the words finally tumbling out, raw and heavy. If Iris hadn't been there, if she hadn't done what she did, he would have won. He would have erased it all. The spark, the covenants, you. The last word was barely a whisper. I'm not strong enough to stop him. Don't be such a kid. Iris snapped, vaulting over the railing from a higher deck to land silently beside them. You sound like you've already lost. We fought a walking piece of nothing and we beat him. That's the only truth that matters. Iris has a point, even if she's blunt about it, Dawn added, her presence calm and analytical. Silas's power is based on negation, on severing bonds. Our power is based on creating them. The moment you and Iris formed the covenant, you created something his power couldn't unmake. That wasn't luck, Ash. That was the entire point. That's how we win. He looked at them, at the four distinct, powerful spirits that were now inextricably linked to his own. Misty's unshakable will, a rock in any storm. May's passionate fire, a flame that refused to be extinguished. Dawn's clear-headed hope, a light that could pierce any darkness. And Iris's wild, primal truth, an instinct that could not be deceived. He wasn't just a boy from Pallet Town anymore, and he wasn't just a vessel for a god's power. He was the center of a constellation. You're right, he said, a real smile finally touching his lips. He reached out, and as if by instinct, they all placed their hands over his. The four silvery marks on their skin, and the golden one on his, seemed to glow with a faint, warm light. I'm not alone in this. The shadow in their bond receded, replaced by a renewed, shared determination. Their arrival in Lumio's city was breathtaking. The city was a testament to Kalosian elegance and innovation, a sprawling metropolis of beautiful architecture and cutting-edge technology, all centered around the glittering spire of the Prism Tower. It was a city pulsing with life, with dreams, with emotion. And the spark felt it. But the pull was different this time. It wasn't a sharp, directional beacon like the others had been. It was a diffuse, gentle presence, woven into the very fabric of the city's atmosphere, like a sweet fragrance carried on the wind. I can feel the next aspect, Ash told the others, their minds linked in silent conversation as they walked the bustling boulevards. But it's everywhere and nowhere. It's not a person, it's a feeling. A feeling. That's not much to go on, Misty projected, her thought laced with her usual pragmatism. Think about it, Dawn countered, her mental voice sharp and focused. The aspect of heart. Where would you find the heart of a city like this? Not in a gym, not in a lab. You'd find it where people gather, where they share strong, positive emotions. As if on cue, they turned a corner into the grand plaza facing the Prism Tower. It was filled with a massive crowd, a sea of people buzzing with an electric excitement. Huge hollow screens were everywhere, displaying the image of a young woman with honey blonde hair and a warm, captivating smile. Halo's Queen Serena, live, tonight. The pull of the spark intensified, centering on the magnificent stage being set up at the base of the tower. Of course, a performer who could connect with and inspire tens of thousands of people at once. Well, May said, a grin in her voice. I think we found our aspect of heart. This feels too easy, Iris muttered, her eyes scanning the rooftops, her instincts on high alert. It's like we're being led right to her. It feels like a trap. It probably is, Ash agreed, his own senses tingling with a low-level warning. Aegis knew their pattern. They knew Ash sought out people he had a connection with. This was the perfect ambush. But we don't have a choice. We have to go. They moved towards the festival grounds as dusk settled, the city lights beginning to twinkle to life. The energy from the crowd was immense, a tidal wave of anticipation and joy. The closer they got to the Prism Tower, the stronger the feeling of the fifth aspect became, a warm and welcoming presence that seemed to wrap around Ash's very soul. And then, it began. Not the performance. The attack. There was no sound, no warning shot. Just a subtle shift in the air, a high-frequency hum that vibrated deep in their bones. It was 1,000 times more powerful than the weapon in Rustboro. The covenants shattered. One moment, Ash was the center of his constellation, feeling the steady presence of his four partners in his mind. The next, there was only a deafening, horrifying silence. The bonds didn't just fade. They were severed, snipped by an invisible, technological blade. The warmth, the strength, the shared consciousness, all of it vanished, leaving him utterly, terrifyingly alone in his own head for the first time in months. The alpha spark, its anchors ripped away, roared to life within him like a cornered animal, a wild inferno of agonizing, uncontrolled power. He cried out, stumbling to his knees as the raw power threatened to tear him apart from the inside. Ash. He heard Misty and the others cry out, their real voices sounding distant and strange. Around them, the crowd began to murmur in confusion and panic as sleek, gray Aegis mechs rose from hidden panels in the plaza floor. They were bipedal war machines, twice the height of a man, their single red optical sensors glowing with cold intent. They moved with silent, lethal efficiency, forming a perimeter, their energy weapons powering up. Massive, shimmering energy walls erupted, boxing Ash and Pikachu in, separating them from the girls and the panicking crowd. A voice, amplified and chillingly calm, boomed from speakers all across the city. Commander Volkov. Greetings, citizens of Lumiose. I apologize for the interruption. The Aegis Foundation is here to neutralize a globally recognized threat. There is no cause for alarm. Please, enjoy the show. Then, the voice shifted, speaking directly to Ash over a private comm. It is over, Herald. We have studied you. Your power requires your emotional anchors, your covenants. Our null cannon, currently in orbit above the city, is blanketing this entire plaza in a frequency designed to sever those spiritual connections. You are cut off. You are alone. And a god without his worshippers is just a myth. Through the shimmering energy wall, Ash could see them, Misty, May, Dawn, Iris, their Pokemon out, fighting to break through, but their attacks just dissipated against the barrier. They were just trainers now. Powerful, yes, but helpless to reach him. And he was just a boy again, albeit one with a star burning in his chest. A boy in agonizing pain, facing down an army of machines. Pikachu, he gritted out, forcing himself to his feet, the spark a chaotic storm inside him. We have to fight. He fought with the desperation of a cornered animal. Pikachu was a lightning bolt, its thunderbolts and iron tails striking the mechs, but their armor was too thick. For every scratch Pikachu inflicted, a dozen more mechs closed in. Ash tried to channel his aura, but it was wild, lashing out in uncontrolled pulses that did more damage to the surrounding pavement than to the enemy. He was weak, disoriented, and crushingly alone. The mechs herded him, their movements a cold, calculated ballet, forcing him back against the base of the prism tower. On the massive, silent stage, Serena stood in shock, her performance forgotten. She watched the chaos unfold, the Aegis mechs, the energy walls, the lone figure of Ash fighting a losing battle. The joy of the festival had curdled into citywide terror. Then she felt it. Aegis's technology was perfect. It had severed the divine, psychic link of the covenants. But Volkov had made one fatal miscalculation. He had failed to account for a bond forged not of divine destiny, but of shared history, of a childhood promise, of a journey through Kalos that had changed them both forever. A bond of the heart. She felt Ash's despair. It wasn't a psychic broadcast. It was a pure, unfiltered emotional cry that she felt in her own soul. The null cannon could jam a god's frequency. It could not jam love. In that moment, she understood. Her power wasn't in her performances, in the ribbons or the accolades. It was in her ability to connect, to feel, to share. She was the aspect of heart. She made a choice. She walked to the front of the stage, her Delphox moving to her side. She took the microphone, and her voice, trembling but clear, rang out over the terrified silence. Everyone, she called out, and on the hollow screens, her face replaced the news tickers. Please, listen to me. My friend is in trouble down there. He's fighting to protect us, but he can't do it alone. Her voice grew stronger, filled with a conviction that cut through the fear. Aegis calls him a threat, but I know him. I know his heart. He needs our help. He needs our hope. Don't let the fear win. Please, lend me your strength. Lend me your hearts. A ripple went through the crowd. They had come for a performance, for a feeling of joy and connection. She was offering them something more. A chance to be part of something real. A single person began to cheer for her. Then another. And another. Soon, the entire plaza, thousands upon thousands of people, were roaring, not in panic, but in a unified wave of hope and defiance, their emotions focused on her, the performer they adored. Serena closed her eyes, feeling the tidal wave of emotion wash over her. It was immense, powerful, a force of nature. She took it all in. The hope, the love, the courage of the crowd, and channeled it. Her entire being began to glow with a soft, golden pink light. She looked at her partner. Delphox. Now, for Ash. Delphox raised its branch, and Serena pushed the entirety of that emotional energy through it. It wasn't a flamethrower or a psychic blast. It was a visible wave of pure, condensed heart, an incandescent tide of love and hope that washed out from the stage. The wave of heart hit the null cannon's frequency. Cold, sterile logic versus pure, unadulterated emotion. There was no contest. The high-pitched hum shattered. In Ash's mind, the silence was broken by a thunderclap. The covenants slammed back into place, not one by one, but all at once, supercharged by the wave of emotion that still permeated the air. The anchors were back, stronger than ever before. The alpha spark, which had been a raging, painful inferno, was suddenly tamed. Anchored by will, passion, knowledge, instinct, and now, at its very center, the unwavering, unifying power of heart, it didn't just stabilize. It ignited. A column of pure, complete, blindingly brilliant golden light erupted from Ash, shooting up the side of the prism tower and into the night sky. The pain was gone, replaced by a feeling of absolute calm, of utter completeness. He looked at the closing circle of Aegis mechs, no longer with desperation, but with a serene and terrible clarity. He raised a hand. He didn't fire a beam or an attack. He simply released a wave of pure, controlled aura. It washed over the mechs. Their weapons disintegrated. Their armor plating dissolved. Their internal mechanisms sparked and died. In less than 5 seconds, the entire army of advanced war machines was reduced to piles of inert, smoking scrap metal. The energy walls fizzled and vanished. The battle was over. Ash slowly lowered his hand, the golden light around him receding, leaving him standing in the sudden, quiet aftermath. He looked towards the stage. Serena was there, one hand outstretched towards him, a radiant smile on her face. A gentle, warm light flowed between them, not with a violent backlash, but with the soft, satisfying click of a keystone locking perfectly into place. The fifth covenant was formed. On Serena's hand, a pink, heart-shaped mark glowed brilliantly for a moment before settling into its silvery, permanent form. He felt her presence in his mind, the most central and profound of them all, the loving heart that gave purpose and unity to all the other aspects. His power was finally whole. Far above the planet, on the Aegis command bridge, every monitor connected to the null cannon flashed with critical error messages before going dark. The cannon was fried, overloaded by a power surge that defied every known law of physics. Commander Volkov stared at the dead screens, his knuckles white where he gripped the console. His perfect trap, his flawless logic, his god-killing weapon, defeated by a performer and a city's feelings. It was illogical. It was impossible. It was an insult to everything he had built. The cold, strategic detachment that had defined him for years finally cracked, replaced by a burning, furious obsession. His enemy wasn't just a boy with power. He was an anomaly that broke the rules of reality itself. What are you? Volkov whispered to the static, his voice a low, dangerous hiss. How do you do that? He no longer just wanted to neutralize Ash Ketchum. He needed to understand him. And he would tear the world apart to get his answer. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. The Trial of Sun and Moon. The flight to Alola was on a private jet, chartered by Cynthia under the guise of an official league investigation. The luxury was lost on them. While the world's media buzzed with speculation about the Lumio's liberation, and the mysterious aspects, allied with Ash Ketchum, the six of them felt the walls closing in. Their victory had been too public, too spectacular. They had revealed their hand, and now every power player in the world, from regional champions to the shadowy remnants of Aegis, was watching. Ash stood at the window, watching the endless expanse of blue ocean slide by beneath them. The Unity Spark, now whole and complete with Serena's heart at its core, was a calm, steady sun inside him. But it was also a sensitive instrument, and for the past hour, it had begun to feel a deep, resonant corruption from the direction they were heading. It was the cold, cloying signature of Silas and the adversary, but it was vast, intertwined with a power that was ancient and celestial. He was no longer just punching holes in the world, he was trying to poison its very heart. He's there, Ash said, not needing to turn around. His voice, low and certain, filled the quiet cabin. In his mind, he felt the immediate response from his covenants. Of course he is, Misty projected, a thought as sharp and unbending as her will. He's not going to just let us collect the final piece of the puzzle. Alola's life force is incredibly strong, Dawn added, her thoughts a cascade of data and intuition. The Tapu Guardians, the Ultra Wormholes, it's a nexus of immense energy. If he could corrupt that, he'd create a wound that would never heal, Serena finished, her mental voice filled with a profound, empathetic sorrow. They were a single mind now, a coalition of spirits bound to a common purpose. Serena, the newest link, was still getting used to the sheer intensity of the bond. She could feel Misty's pragmatic resolve, May's fiery spirit, Dawn's sharp intellect, and Iris's wild instincts all at once, anchored by Ash's unwavering center. It was like hearing a beautiful, complex piece of music from the inside. The moment their jet broke through the cloud cover of the Alola region, they all felt it. The warmth, the vibrant life force, the famous, Aloha spirit, of the islands was muted, suppressed by a blanket of fear and wrongness. A psychic scream of pain emanated from the southeastern island, a place of rugged, primal energy. Pony Island. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom, tight with panic. Ketchum, we have a problem. There are things in the sky over Pony Island. The island guardian is engaged, but it looks like a war zone. We can't land. Get us as close as you can, Ash commanded, his eyes fixed on the distant island, where flashes of light, both divine and profane, lit up the afternoon sky. We'll handle the rest. They didn't need a landing strip. Ash gathered the Unity Spark, wrapping them all in a cocoon of golden energy, and teleported them from the jet's altitude to the rocky shores of Pony Canyon. The transition was seamless, a testament to his newfound control. They arrived in chaos. The air was thick with the smell of ozone and decay. In the sky above the altar of the sun and moon, a colossal being of shifting shadow and broken light was locked in combat with Tapu Fini, whose misty terrain was being eaten away by the creature's void energy. It was a void titan, a far more powerful entity than the void spawn from Lake Verity, and the guardian of Pony Island was losing. The titan is a distraction. Iris yelled, her instincts screaming at her. The real poison is at the altar. Ash knew she was right. He could feel two immense, celestial presences at the altar, Solgaleo and Lunala, and they were in agony, their light being actively drained and corrupted by Silas's Omega power. Split up. Ash commanded through the bond, the strategy forming instantly in all their minds. Misty, May, Dawn, Iris. You're with me. We go to the altar. Serena, you and the other Tapis need to help Tapu Fini. Hold that Titan back. Serena nodded, her expression firm. Her role as the heart was not just emotional, it was the central hub of their power. Don't worry. We won't let it advance. Go. As Ash and the others raced towards the towering archway of the altar, they saw the other three island guardians, Tapu Koko, Tapu Lele, and Tapu Bulu, converging, drawn by the desperate struggle. Serena and her Pokemon met them, her presence a beacon of calming, unifying heart, coordinating their divine power with a grace that no trainer had ever before possessed. Ash, Misty, May, Dawn, and Iris burst onto the sacred platform of the altar. The scene was worse than he could have imagined. Solgaleo and Lunala were chained not by physical restraints, but by tendrils of pure void energy that snaked from Silas. He stood between them on the raised dais, his arms outstretched, his eyes closed in concentration as he siphoned their cosmic light, twisting it into a shadowy mockery of itself. And at the base of the dais, a lone figure stood against him. Lily. She was dressed in the simple white dress she had worn when she'd first embraced her courage. Her hands were outstretched, a faint, pure white aura emanating from them. She wasn't fighting. She was trying to soothe the legendary beasts, to reach them through the pain and corruption with her own gentle spirit. Her face was pale with strain, but her expression was one of absolute, selfless resolve. The final aspect. Grace and purity. You cannot save them, child, Silas said without opening his eyes, his voice echoing with the stolen power of sun and moon. Their light will serve a new purpose. It will fuel the final rift, the one that will welcome the adversary into this world. They are not fuel. They are life. Lily cried back, tears streaming down her face from the effort. Ash, we have to stop him. May yelled, her Blaziken readying a blaze kick. But before they could act, a new sound cut through the air. The low, heavy thrum of engines. From the clouds, a fleet of sleek, gray Aegis jets descended, their weapons bristling. They didn't fire. They moved to form a perimeter, a containing wall of steel. A single, larger vessel hovered directly above the altar, and a massive, ring-shaped cannon lowered from its belly, humming with a terrifying, familiar energy. The null cannon, refitted and repurposed. A holographic screen flickered to life on the side of the lead vessel, displaying the cold, grim face of Commander Volkov. Silas, vessel of the Omega, he announced, his voice amplified across the island. Your reign of terror ends today. Surrender, or we will be forced to use lethal force. Silas finally opened his eyes, a flicker of genuine amusement in them. Your toys are useless against me, mortal. Are they? Volkov's gaze shifted, locking onto Ash. Herald. An unfortunate coincidence, our meeting here. But perhaps a fortuitous one. We have a common enemy. Step aside, and let us finish this. Finish this how? Ash shot back, his eyes on the cannon. That thing isn't a normal weapon. Correct. Volkov stated, his voice devoid of emotion. It is no longer designed to sever your covenants. After its failure in Lumiose, we recalibrated it. It is now tuned to the specific frequency of the Omega's power. One blast will sever Silas from the adversary permanently. It will excise the cancer. But it's a wide-frequency blast, Dawn realized, her mind processing the implications with horrifying speed. Solgaleo and Lunala are drenched in his energy. If you fire that thing, they will be caught in the blast, Volkov finished, his face a mask of grim necessity. Their divine matrix will be torn apart. They will die. It is an acceptable and necessary sacrifice to eliminate a being who would destroy the entire planet. I am saving billions of lives at the cost of two. It is a choice a true leader must make. A choice you are incapable of, Herald. It was the ultimate dilemma. A three-way war. Ash's team, caught between the god killer who would sacrifice the world's soul, and the god avatar who would erase its existence. Let Volkov fire, and the legendaries die, but Silas is stopped. Stop Volkov, and Silas completes his ritual, dooming the world. Ash looked at his partners, their faces a mixture of horror and resolve. He looked at Lily, still trying desperately to shield the Pokemon she loved. He looked at the cannon, whining as it reached full charge. He had to choose. And in that moment of impossible choice, he found a third option. He turned his full attention to his team, his voice a clarion call in their minds. Girls. The Titan. The Guardians can't hold it forever. Go. Now. There was no hesitation. No questioning. They trusted him completely. Misty, May, Dawn, and Iris spun around and raced back towards the canyon, their Pokemon at their side, a whirlwind of will, passion, knowledge, and instinct, ready to join the larger battle. Ash was now alone, facing down two armies. You see, Volkov, that's where you're wrong, Ash said, his voice calm and clear as he began to walk towards the Aegis commander's hologram. You think leadership is about making the cold, hard choice. But that's not a choice. That's a failure of imagination. He stopped, standing between Volkov's firing line and Silas's ritual. You can't save humanity by sacrificing its soul, Volkov. These Pokemon, these legends, they're part of our world. They're the magic, the wonder. Without that, what are we even fighting to save? Volkov's face tightened. Idealistic nonsense. Fire the cannon. As the weapon began its final firing sequence, its outer rings spinning with terrifying speed, Lily made her move. With a cry of pure, selfless love, she ran up the steps of the dais and threw herself in front of Solgaleo and Lunala, spreading her arms wide, her own small, fragile body the only shield she could offer. Her aura of pure grace flared, a tiny white candle against a hurricane of void and technology. That was it. The final piece. The catalyst. Seeing her act of ultimate, selfless purity, Ash's mind achieved a state of absolute clarity. He wasn't just a herald. He wasn't just an anchor. He was the unity. He wasn't meant to destroy. He was meant to transform. He didn't run. He didn't fight. He leapt. With a burst of aura-enhanced speed, he shot straight up, landing directly on top of the null cannon's massive frame. What is he doing? Volkov roared from his command ship. Ash placed his hands on the cannon's central power core, and he didn't try to break it. He pushed. He poured the entirety of the Unity Spark, the combined and complete power of will, passion, knowledge, instinct, and heart, directly into the weapon's energy stream. He wasn't trying to overload it. He was hijacking it. He was rewriting its purpose. You want to sever a connection, Volkov? Ash yelled into the roaring wind. Let's sever the right one. The cannon fired. But the beam that erupted was not the cold, sterile silver of the null frequency. It was a torrent of incandescent, shimmering gold. A purge pulse. The beam struck the altar. It washed over Silas. He screamed, not in pain, but in loss, as the pure, creative energy of the Alpha forcibly and violently ripped the adversary's Omega power from his soul, leaving him whole but horrifyingly empty. The beam struck the Void Titan in the distance. The colossal beast, which had been overwhelming the combined might of the 4 Guardians and 5 Covenants, simply dissolved under the purifying light, its shadowy form disintegrating into harmless motes. And the beam struck Lily and the legendaries. The void tendrils chaining Solgaleo and Lunala vaporized. The corruption in their spirits was burned away. And Lily, at the center of it all, was bathed in a light so pure, so powerful, that her entire being resonated with it. The final covenant formed. Not with a backlash, not with a whisper, but with a triumphant, harmonious chord that echoed across all of Alola. Ash felt the sixth and final anchor lock into his soul. Lily's grace. Her purity. It was the final, critical element that didn't just stabilize the spark, but perfected it. The raging sun within him was now a perfectly balanced, steady star. He was complete. The unity spark was stable. The light faded. Solgaleo and Lunala were free, roaring their gratitude to the heavens. The Titan was gone. Silas, no longer a vessel but just a broken, confused man, collapsed on the altar, where Cynthia's Garchomp, arriving with her reinforcements, landed to take him into custody. On his command ship, Commander Volkov stared at the scene, his entire worldview, his life's work, his cold, hard logic, shattered by an act of impossible, idealistic mercy. His weapon had been turned into an instrument of healing. His enemy had saved the day without sacrificing a thing. He slowly sank into his command chair, a broken man. He didn't even resist when Cynthia's forces boarded his ship. He just surrendered. Ash landed softly on the altar, his body humming with a new, calm power. He walked over to Lily, who was staring at the new silvery mark on her hand, a delicate shape like the petals of a grossedia flower. She looked up at him, her eyes filled with a dawning understanding of the bond she now shared. He smiled, a genuine, warm smile. He was surrounded by his friends, his partners, his covenants. His family. They were all there, all 6 of them, now a complete circle. They had faced down their human enemies and their divine rival. They had won. But as he looked up at the sky, at the spot where the Void Titan had vanished, he knew. They had only defeated the soldiers. The adversary itself, the great, silent unmaking, was still out there. And it had just lost its chosen vessel. Now, it would have to act on its own. The real war was about to begin. Chapter 6 End. Chapter 7. The Interlude of Palette. The world celebrated a victory it didn't understand. News outlets fed a carefully curated narrative by Cynthia, and the now cooperative International Pokemon League hailed Ash Ketchum and his companions as heroes. They were the aspects of the champion, a special task force credited with preventing a series of catastrophic dimensional collapses. Aegis was officially condemned, its assets seized, and Commander Volkov was awaiting a trial that would be the stuff of legends. Silas, the Omega vessel, was a classified secret, a ghost story whispered only in the highest echelons of power, now safely locked away in a maximum security prison. To the public, the crisis was over. For the 7 people at the heart of it, the silence that followed was the strangest part. After months of running, fighting, and being psychically bound in a war for creation, the sudden stillness was jarring. They spent 2 days on a League-chartered jumbo jet, flying from Alola back to Kanto, cocooned in a bubble of quiet luxury that felt utterly alien. There were no monsters to fight, no assassins to dodge, no impending apocalypses to avert. There was only the low hum of the engines and the vast, empty sky. It gave them time to talk. Truly talk. Not in the swift, efficient language of the bond, but with words, with laughter, with the easy, comfortable silences of old friends rediscovering each other. They learned the shape of their new family. Misty's sharp wit was the perfect foil for Serena's gentle diplomacy. May's adventurous spirit found a kindred soul in Iris's wild heart. And Dawn, with her sharp, analytical mind, became the one who could explain the unexplainable, putting words to the strange new reality they all shared. And at the center of it all was Ash. He wasn't just their anchor anymore, he was their home. They orbited him, drew strength from him, and in turn, their presence kept the stellar power within him from becoming a black hole of responsibility. He listened to their stories, laughed at their jokes, and for the first time in a long time, the weight on his shoulders felt less like a burden and more like a mantle he was proud to wear, because he was not wearing it alone. As the plane began its descent, Ash looked out the window. The familiar green patchwork of Kanto spread out below him, a sight so simple, so normal, it made his heart ache. He could see the small, unassuming cluster of buildings that was Pallet Town. Home. The word resonated through the bond, a shared feeling of profound relief and a little bit of terror. Facing the adversary was one thing. Facing his mother was another entirely. Delia Ketchum was tending the flowers in her front garden when they arrived. She looked up as the 7 of them walked up the path, a small herd of assorted Pokemon trailing behind them. She wiped a smudge of dirt from her cheek with a gloved hand, her brow furrowed for a moment as she took in the sight. Her son, taller now, broader, with a quiet confidence in his eyes that she'd never seen before. And with him, 6 young women she recognized from years of phone calls, postcards, and televised tournaments. Ash, you're home, she exclaimed, her face breaking into a radiant smile. She hurried over and pulled him into a hug that smelled of potting soil and unconditional love. Oh, I was so worried. The news, the stories, they said you were on a top secret mission for the champion. Yeah, something like that, Ash mumbled into her shoulder, feeling about 10 years old again. Delia pulled back, her eyes twinkling as she looked at the 6 girls who were standing in a slightly awkward semicircle behind him. And you brought friends. Misty, May, Dawn. It's been so long. And Iris, Serena, Lily. It's so wonderful to finally meet you in person. Ash has told me so much about all of you. There was a beat of silence. 6 pairs of eyes glanced at Ash, then at each other. How, exactly, were they supposed to explain this? Misty, ever the blunt one, decided to just get it over with. It's great to see you too, Mrs. Ketchum. Actually, there's a reason we're all here together. Delia's smile didn't falter. She just looked at the six of them, then back at her son, and a slow, dawning understanding bloomed in her eyes. It was not an understanding of divine covenants or cosmic wars. It was a mother's intuition, a force far older and just as powerful. She saw the way they stood near him, the easy familiarity, the protective aura they all seemed to share. She saw the way Serena's gaze lingered on him, the way Misty elbowed him playfully, the way Lily looked at him with pure, unadulterated adoration. She put her hands on her hips, her expression shifting from surprise to a kind of amused, overwhelming acceptance. Oh, she said simply. Oh, I see. She looked at Ash, a teasing glint in her eye. You were always so focused on Pokemon, I was starting to worry you'd never notice girls. It seems I was worried about the wrong thing. She beamed at the group. Well, don't just stand there in the dirt. You're all staying for dinner, of course. I'll have to make my special croquettes. Are any of you allergic to anything? Ash, you never said. And just like that, the tension evaporated, replaced by a wave of stunned, relieved laughter. They weren't aspects or covenants or guardians of creation. They were just Ash's friends. And to Delia Ketchum, that meant they were family. The next few days in Pallet Town were an interlude of impossible peace. Their arrival did not go unnoticed. Professor Oak, upon seeing the procession walk past his lab, had nearly dropped a rare fossil. He'd hurried over, his scientific curiosity practically vibrating off him. Ash, my boy, astonishing, he'd declared, peering at the faint, silvery marks on their hands through his spectacles. The energy signatures are faint, but perfectly stable. A symbiotic spiritual fusion on a multinodal scale. It's unprecedented. We must run some scans. Non-invasively, of course. The implications for aura research are simply staggering. Even Gary had been left speechless. He'd sauntered over from the lab, his usual air of smug superiority firmly in place, ready to greet his old rival with a trademark, "Smell ya later, Ashy boy." But he'd stopped dead in his tracks, his eyes widening as he took in the scene. He saw Ash, not as the clumsy, perpetually late kid he grew up with, but as a man surrounded by six of the most powerful and accomplished young women in the world, all of them looking at him with an undeniable mixture of respect, loyalty, and affection. Gary had just stared for a long moment, the smirk melting from his face, replaced by a look of genuine, grudging awe. He shook his head slowly. Ashy boy, he'd said, his voice uncharacteristically quiet. You won. He wasn't talking about the Pokemon League. He was talking about everything. With that single, shocking admission of defeat, a rivalry that had defined their childhoods finally, peacefully, came to an end. But the real story of those days unfolded in the quiet moments, in the spaces between the welcome home dinners and the professor's excited research. It was in these moments that the covenants, forged in the heat of battle and divine destiny, began to settle into the deeper, more complex bonds of love. One afternoon, Ash found Misty by the small river that ran behind his house, skipping stones across the water just as they had done as kids. The bond between them was comfortable, familiar, a well-worn path. It was fiery and argumentative, but built on a foundation of absolute, unshakable trust. It's weird, isn't it? She said, not looking at him. Being back here. Everything's the same, but we're not. Yeah, he said, sitting beside her on the grassy bank. A little. He felt her anxieties through the bond, the uncertainty of the future, the question of what happened after they saved the world. You know, she said, finally turning to him, a small, wry smile on her face. For years, I told myself I was just following you to get you to pay me back for my bike. You're never going to let me forget that, are you? He laughed. Never. She grinned. But it wasn't true. Not really. Not after the first few weeks, anyway. You were just, you. An idiot, most of the time. But a brave, loyal idiot. My idiot. She nudged him with her shoulder. I guess what I'm saying is, this covenant thing, it didn't really change how I felt. It just gave it a name. He felt the truth of her words, the simple, powerful will that had always been a part of his life. He nudged her back, and their hands brushed. Their covenant marks seemed to warm in response. It wasn't a dramatic declaration. It was a quiet acknowledgement of a love that had always been there, waiting. His moments with the others were just as unique. He and May had a sparring match in Professor Oak's corral, Infernape versus her Blaziken. The battle was a blur of passionate fire and fierce competition, but their bond turned it into a dance. They moved in perfect sync, anticipating each other's every thought. The battle ended in a draw, both of them laughing and breathless, and in the fiery, ambitious spirit they shared, he felt a love that was about pushing each other, about always striving to be better, together. He found Dawn in the professor's library, where she was devouring ancient texts on aura and creation myths, trying to find any historical precedent for what was happening to them. Their connection was intellectual, a meeting of minds. They talked for hours, not about their feelings, but about strategies, about the nature of the adversary, about their hopes for the world they were trying to build. And in her unwavering optimism, in the brilliant light of her mind, he found a love that was about shared dreams and the quiet confidence that, together, they could solve any problem. With Iris, there were few words. She coaxed him into a race to the top of the tallest tree on the hill behind Pallet Town. They climbed with the wild, reckless abandon of children, their laughter echoing through the woods. At the top, sitting on a branch overlooking the town, the world spread out beneath them, he felt her untamed spirit, a connection to the raw, instinctual life of the world. Her love wasn't something to be spoken, it was something to be felt, a wild and freeing truth that made him feel more alive than ever. Lily's moment came in the garden, where she was helping his mother with the roses. She had a gentle, nurturing touch that seemed to make the flowers bloom brighter. Her love was quieter, a profound gratitude and a fierce, protective instinct that mirrored his own feelings for her. She thanked him, her voice soft, for showing her how to be brave. He told her that her grace and purity were a strength all their own, the very thing that had saved Solgaleo and Lunala. Theirs was a love born of mutual healing, a gentle, quiet promise to always keep the other safe. And then there was Serena. He found her on the porch swing at dusk, gently rocking back and forth, a thoughtful expression on her face. Their bond was the heart of the unity, the deepest and most resonant of them all, colored by a shared history he was only now beginning to fully understand. I remember when we first met, she said softly, breaking the comfortable silence. At Professor Oak's summer camp. You helped me when I was hurt. You told me, don't give up, till it's over. He remembered. A forgotten memory, a small act of kindness from his childhood. You never forgot that. Never, she said, turning to him, her blue eyes shining in the twilight. It was the day I started admiring you, Ash. Your strength, your kindness, your heart. She blushed, but didn't look away. When we traveled together in Kalos, I wanted to tell you. But I wasn't brave enough. Serena, he started, but she placed a gentle finger on his lips. It's okay, she whispered. I don't need to say it now. We can both feel it, can't we? He could. It was a current that ran deeper than the other bonds, a gentle, powerful river of affection that had been flowing towards him his entire life. He took her hand, his thumb tracing the heart-shaped mark. The covenant of heart. It hadn't created the connection, it had only revealed what was already there. He leaned in, and in the quiet of the evening, he kissed her. It was gentle, hesitant, and yet it felt like the most natural thing in the world, the final keystone of his heart clicking perfectly into place. Later that night, the celebrations were over. The girls had taken over the spare rooms, and a peaceful quiet had fallen over the small house. But Ash couldn't sleep. He slipped out of the house, Pikachu on his shoulder, and walked to the top of the hill overlooking the sleeping town. He looked up at the stars, at the vast, silent canvas of the cosmos. The unity spark inside him felt like a part of that cosmos, a star in its own right. And that was what scared him. What if I'm not me anymore, buddy? He whispered to Pikachu, his voice tight with a fear he hadn't allowed himself to feel until now. What if Ash Ketchum is gone? What if I'm just it? The spark. The herald. What if I save the world and there's nothing left of the guy who just wanted to be a Pokemon master? Pikachu. Pikachu nuzzled his cheek, its own small heart filled with a fierce, unwavering belief in the boy it had always known. A soft footstep on the grass behind him made him turn. It was all of them. Misty, May, Dawn, Iris, Serena, and Lily. They had felt the spike of his fear through the bond, a cold, lonely feeling that had woken them all. They came and sat with him on the grass, forming a circle around him under the starlight. They didn't have an answer. They didn't offer platitudes or easy reassurances. They just were. They felt his fear and met it with their own quiet strength. Misty was the first to move. She reached out and grabbed his hand, her grip firm and resolute. Serena leaned against his shoulder, her presence a warm, comforting weight. May rested her head on his other shoulder, a silent gesture of solidarity. Dawn and Lily sat before him, their expressions filled with a profound understanding. Whoever you are, Ash Ketchum, Iris said, her voice fierce and low as she grasped his arm. You're ours. And we're yours, Lily finished, her voice a soft, unbreakable promise. One by one, they all reached out, their hands covering his. A gentle, multicolored light began to emanate from their covenants, not a brilliant flare of divine power, but a soft, warm, and deeply personal glow. It was the light of 6 distinct souls, 6 different kinds of love, all weaving together to anchor his own. He wasn't just a vessel. He wasn't just a herald. He was Ash. And he was theirs. And that, he realized, was more than enough. Far away, in the deepest, most secure sector of the Aegis Foundation's primary black site prison, a man sat in the center of a sterile white cell. Silas. The power dampeners in the walls were absolute, rendering even the most powerful psychic or aura user completely inert. He was just a man again, and the silence in his soul was a screaming torment after being filled with the voice of the adversary. He was broken. The single, silent guard standing watch outside his energy-shielded door suddenly stiffened. The guard's eyes, for a fraction of a second, went completely black, like pools of ink. The guard turned and keyed in a deactivation sequence. The energy shield fizzled and died. He stepped into the cell. Silas looked up, his eyes dull. Have you come to finish it? The guard's voice was wrong. It was a layered, dissonant chorus that seemed to emanate from all around them. The master is displeased. He gave you a universe of power. He offered you mercy. You chose pain. A flicker of something returned to Silas's eyes. A memory of the alpha spark, of the untamed, chaotic, beautiful explosion of life that had burned him. A memory of the choice he'd made, to fight for a world of suffering over a peaceful void. No, Silas said, a slow, terrible smile spreading across his face. His eyes began to bleed into that same, inky blackness as the guards. I chose life. And in that moment, he understood the adversary's true lesson. Mercy was a flawed concept. If life was the source of pain, then the only logical, righteous path was not to offer a peaceful end. It was to become the ultimate instrument of that pain, to prove its futility, and to erase life not as an act of kindness, but as an act of vengeance against the very concept of creation. The guard's body dissolved into a cloud of roiling shadow, which then flowed into Silas, reigniting the void within him, not as a gift, but as a brand. His power returned, 1,000-fold, no longer the gentle silver of unmaking, but the raging, absolute black of pure annihilation. The prison, a fortress built of steel and science, designed to hold gods, simply ceased to be. It did not explode. It did not crumble. The very concept of its existence was erased, leaving behind a perfect, silent sphere of nothingness in the frozen tundra where it once stood. The age of mercy was over. The age of vengeance had begun. Chapter 7 End. Chapter 8. The Shadow of the Creator. The peace of Pallet Town was a fragile, beautiful thing. For a week, the war for creation felt like a distant nightmare, a story that had happened to other people. Mornings were spent in the wide-open spaces of Professor Oak's corral, a place teeming with life and memory. It became their training ground, a place to understand the true potential of the completed Unity Spark. It was less like training and more like a dance. Ash stood at the center, a calm anchor, while the 6 young women who were now his other halves moved around him, their Pokemon mirroring their perfect synchronicity. Okay, let's try the Tempest formation. Dawn's voice echoed in their minds, her strategic insight providing the blueprint. Misty, Iris, wide perimeter. Gyarados and Haxorus create a cross-current of Dragon Rage and Hydro Pump. May, Serena, inner circle. Blaziken's flare blitzed to herd the target, Delphox's mystical fire to control its movement. Lily, you and Alolan Nettles provide defensive cover with Aurora Veil. I'll call the shot with Mamoswine. Their target was a simulation. One of Professor Oak's more durable training drones, programmed with the attack patterns of a legendary Pokémon. It zipped through the air, firing harmless beams of light. Ash didn't give a verbal command. He simply focused his will. The Unity Spark resonated, becoming a conduit for their combined intent. The air crackled. Gyarados and Haxorus unleashed their attacks in a devastating, swirling vortex of water and draconic energy that boxed the drone in. Blaziken became a comet of fire, its movements perfectly anticipated by Delphox, whose elegant streams of purple flame guided the drone into the heart of the tempest. Lily. Now. Ash projected. A shimmering, rainbow-colored curtain of light erupted around the inner circle, a flawless aurora veil that would have deflected any counterattack. Dawn. Finish it. Mamoswine, a beast of ice and earth, stomped its foot. A cage of massive ice pillars erupted from the ground, trapping the drone completely. The entire sequence, from conception to execution, had taken less than 3 seconds. Professor Oak, watching from a safe distance with a dozen sensors and a wide grin, scribbled furiously in his notebook. Incredible. The reaction time is virtually zero. Their spiritual resonance allows for a form of predictive tactical execution. It's not just communication, it's shared consciousness. Later, as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the fields, the energy of training gave way to a quiet, domestic peace. May and Delia Ketchum were in the kitchen, a chaotic but joyful storm of flour and spices, arguing good-naturedly over the proper way to season a stew. Lily was carefully tending to a wounded Pidgey that had fallen from its nest, her gentle aura a soothing balm. Misty and Iris were having a fiercely competitive fishing contest at the river, their laughter echoing up the hill. Ash was sitting on the porch steps with Dawn and Serena, watching the colors of the sky change. The bond was a low, warm hum between them, a comfortable silence that needed no words. He could feel Dawn's mind, still buzzing with tactical possibilities and historical correlations. He could feel Serena's heart, a deep, calm well of affection that was now the unshakable foundation of his own emotional state. It feels normal, Serena said aloud, her voice soft. Scarily normal. The calm before the storm, Dawn added, her gaze distant. The adversary lost its vessel. An entity that powerful doesn't just give up. It's regrouping, reassessing. Let it, Ash said, his voice filled with a quiet confidence he hadn't possessed a month ago. He looked at the house, at the distant figures of his friends, his family. We'll be ready for it. This time, we're not scattered. We're whole. He felt their agreement, a wave of shared resolve that was more powerful than any Pokémon attack. They were the guardians of creation. This small patch of earth, this simple town, was the heart of the world they were fighting for. They would not let it fall. And then the scream came. It wasn't a sound. It was a psychic shockwave that erupted from the heavens and struck the entire planet at once. It was a chord of pure, divine agony. Every living thing felt it. Pokémon cried out in fear and confusion. People clutched their heads, a sudden, inexplicable sorrow washing over them. In Ash's mind, and in the minds of his covenants, it was infinitely worse. They were directly connected to the source of that power. They felt the Creator's pain as if it were their own. Ash cried out and collapsed, clutching his chest as the Unity Spark flared wildly, reacting to its maker's torment. The girls all stumbled, their faces paling as the harmonious symphony of their bond was pierced by a shriek of cosmic despair. The sky, which had been a beautiful canvas of sunset orange and purple, began to bleed into a sick, bruised gray. The very light of the world seemed to be dimming, as if a great shadow was falling over the sun. They all knew, with a certainty that chilled them to the very marrow of their bones. The interlude was over. The storm was here. They gathered in the front yard, their Pokémon emerging, sensing the shift in the world, their bodies tense and ready. Delia Ketchum ran out of the house, her face a mask of fear. Ash, what was that? What's happening? Mom, get back inside, Ash ordered, his voice tight. Professor, you two, lock the doors. Don't come out, no matter what. He could feel it now. A pinpoint of absolute, searing cold descending upon Pallet Town. A presence so utterly antithetical to life that the grass crisped and turned brown where its shadow fell. He landed in the center of the street. Not with a teleport, not with a flash of power. He simply arrived. Silas. He was different. The simple traveler's clothes were gone, replaced by a long, dark coat that seemed woven from shadow itself. His eyes, once filled with a misguided empathy, now held the cold, dead light of distant, dying stars. The gentle, sorrowful aura was gone, replaced by a suffocating pressure of pure, nihilistic rage. This was not the vessel of a merciful void. This was the avatar of an angry god. The herald has his aspects, Silas's voice echoed, no longer soft and melodic, but a layered, grating sound that scraped at the edges of their minds. The alpha has his family. He said the word as if it were a curse. A pity. All attachments are a source of pain. They are the flaw in the design. Therefore, all attachments must be severed. Silas. Ash stepped forward, the unity spark flaring to life, a golden sun against the encroaching darkness. What did you do? What did you do to Arceus? Silas laughed, a dry, humorless sound. The creator has been called to account for its flawed creation. It is indisposed. I am no longer here to offer a gentle end, herald. I am here to serve as the lesson. The final, painful truth. I am here to prove that your bonds are not a strength. They are a vulnerability. And I will tear them from you, one by one, until you are left with nothing but the agony of your loss. He raised a hand. The air around him shimmered and warped. This was not the calm, silvery light of unmaking. This was a roiling, absolute blackness. The power of annihilation. There's no reasoning with him. Iris's voice cut through their bond, sharp and clear. He's not a person anymore. He's just a weapon. Then we break him, Misty added, her will a blade of cold, hard steel. The seven of them moved, not as individuals, but as a single, perfectly coordinated fighting machine. There was no grand strategy, no complex formation. There was only a unified, overwhelming response. Now, Ash commanded, his voice and thought as one. The world erupted in a storm of elemental fury. It was a display of power that would have shattered any Pokemon League. A tidal wave of Hydro Pump, a vortex of Dragon Rage, a blazing inferno of Flare Blitz and Mystical Fire, a blizzard of Ice Beam, and a blinding flash of Moonblast, all weaving together, their energies amplified and harmonized by the Unity Spark, into a single, colossal wave of destruction that surged towards Silas. At the head of the wave was a golden thunderbolt from Pikachu, supercharged into a spear of pure creation. It was an attack that could have leveled a mountain. Silas didn't move. He didn't erect a shield. He simply held up his hand, and the blackness of annihilation flowed from him. The wave of power struck the blackness. And it vanished. It didn't explode. It wasn't deflected or absorbed. It was erased. The water, the fire, the draconic energy, the fairy light, the very concept of the attack was utterly and completely unwritten from existence. The silence that followed was more terrifying than any explosion. Your bonds create, Silas stated, his voice a dead monotone as he lowered his hand. My bond annihilates. It is a simple, final math. He moved. He was faster than light, a flicker of shadow that appeared directly in front of Misty. Before her Gyarados could even react, he pressed his hand against her forehead. Misty screamed. It was a raw, agonized sound that echoed both aloud and through the bond. Ash felt it like a physical blow, a blade of ice stabbing into his soul. He saw, through their connection, what she was feeling. The covenant, the bond of will that connected them, was being assaulted by a force of pure negation. It was being torn, shredded, ripped from its spiritual anchor points. The first bond. The most stubborn, Silas hissed, a cruel smirk twisting his lips. Let it be the first to break. Get away from her. Ash roared. He teleported, appearing behind Silas, his hand glowing with a golden aura shaped into a blade. He swung, aiming to sever Silas's arm. But Silas was already gone. He reappeared a dozen feet away, dragging a struggling Misty with him, held fast by a tendril of shadow. Predictable. You fight to protect. A fatal flaw. The girls reacted, a coordinated assault of instinct and strategy. But Silas was different now. He was a being of pure negation. May's Blaziken threw a blaze kick, but the flames extinguished inches from Silas's body. Dawn's Mamoswine charged, but a wall of blackness rose from the ground, and the great beast stumbled, its own momentum seemingly erased. He was toying with them. Proving his point. He tightened his grip on the shadow tendril holding Misty. Her covenant mark, the blue droplet on her hand, began to flicker violently, like a dying light bulb. In Ash's mind, her steady, anchoring presence was a flickering flame in a hurricane, threatening to go out. "You see, Harold," Silas said, his eyes fixed on Ash. "This is the pain of attachment. Soon, it will be over." A blur of green and purple shot from the side. "Get your filthy hands off her, you creep!" Iris shrieked. Haxorus, moving with incredible speed, swung its axe-like tusk in a devastating arc. Silas was forced to release Misty to erect a barrier of shadow. The attack struck the barrier, and Haxorus was thrown back, but Misty was free. She collapsed to the ground, gasping, clutching her hand where the mark was now faded, almost invisible. The connection in Ash's mind was a faint, painful thread. "You have spirit, aspect of instinct," Silas noted, turning his cold gaze on Iris. "Let's see if we can break it." He vanished and reappeared before her. But this time, they were ready. Lily's Nanetals had already created a shield of Aurora Veil. Serena's Delphox unleashed a wall of mystical fire. The two defensive moves, one of grace, one of heart, combined into a shimmering, ethereal barrier. Silas's hand touched the barrier. And it dissolved like mist. "Your love is an illusion," he whispered as he passed through the non-existent shield. He grabbed Iris by the front of her shirt, lifting her off the ground. The bond with Iris, the wild, primal, truthful one, screamed in agony in Ash's mind. It was a feeling of being caged, of being silenced, of the wild world itself being strangled. This couldn't go on. They were being picked apart. Their unity was being used against them, each attack on one of them a wound to all of them. Now, the keystone. Dawn's thought cut through the panic, a clear, sharp plan. Serena understood instantly. The heart. The center. She closed her eyes, not focusing on Silas, but on her friends. She poured her entire being into the covenants, not as an attack, but as a wave of pure, unifying emotional support. A golden pink light emanated from her, washing over the others. The flickering bond with Misty stabilized. The assault on Iris's spirit was momentarily repelled. For a heartbeat, their shattered unity was restored, stronger than before, reinforced by the absolute, unwavering power of the heart. For the first time, a flicker of surprise crossed Silas's face. He was thrown back a step, not by a physical force, but by the sheer, indomitable power of their love for each other. "Impressive," he conceded. "You have reinforced the links. Then I shall simply have to break them all at once." He rose into the air, the dark coat swirling around him. The sky, already a dismal gray, went completely black. The sun vanished. Pallet Town was plunged into an unnatural, absolute darkness. "You sought to save a world of light and life," Silas's voice boomed from the darkness. "You will watch it die, and then you will follow." He spread his arms, and the blackness of annihilation began to descend, not as an attack, but as a crushing, absolute reality. It was a wave of pure erasure, aimed not just at them, but at the entire town, at the lab, at the corral, at everything Ash had ever called home. They couldn't fight it. It was too vast, too absolute. But they could shield against it. Together. Ash roared, his voice the only sound in the suffocating silence. He planted his feet, the golden light of the unity spark exploding from him. The girls formed a circle around him, their own auras flaring to life. Blue, red, white, purple, pink, and a second, pure white. They poured all of their power, all of their being, into Ash. The 6 colors flowed into his golden aura, weaving together into a single, magnificent dome of incandescent, rainbow-colored light that covered the entire town. It was the ultimate shield, the combined power of all the covenants and the unity spark, a bastion of creation against the tide of nothingness. The wave of annihilation crashed against the dome. The impact was silent, but the pressure was infinite. The world outside the shield ceased to be. The trees, the hills, the very sky, all of it was erased, replaced by a perfect, featureless void. Inside the dome, the 7 of them strained, their faces etched with effort, pouring every ounce of their life force into maintaining the shield. But Silas was stronger. The power of the adversary, raw and undiluted, was absolute. Cracks began to appear in the dome. Hairline fractures of blackness spider webbing across their perfect light. The first to break was the weakest link, Misty's, already damaged. With a sound like shattering glass in Ash's soul, her blue aura sputtered and died. The bond snapped shut. She was thrown from the circle, her covenant mark vanishing completely. Misty. Ash cried out, the loss of her presence a gaping wound in his mind. Then Iris. The wild purple light was extinguished. The second bond shattered. She was thrown back. Then Dawn. The clear white light winked out. May. The passionate red was snuffed. Lily. The gentle grace was overwhelmed. One by one, they were broken, their connections to him severed, the shield crumbling piece by piece until only two lights remained. Serena's foundational pink, and Ash's own desperate gold. It's no use, Ash. Serena cried out, tears streaming down her face as she fought to maintain the last link. He's too strong. I won't let him win. Ash roared, pushing every last shred of his power into the shield. But it was a futile gesture. With a final, sorrowful sigh, Serena's link, the heart of it all, was crushed. The pink light vanished. The bond was gone. The shield disintegrated. Ash was alone. Utterly, completely alone in his own mind, the silence a screaming agony worse than any physical pain. He was just a boy again, with a raging, untamed, and now unanchored star of power in his chest. The wave of annihilation washed over him, and he was sent tumbling, his golden aura flickering like a dying candle. He landed in a heap at the foot of the hill where he and Pikachu had watched the stars just the night before. His friends, his covenants, were scattered and unconscious, their spirits battered, their divine connection to him gone. Silas descended, landing softly before him. The void receded, leaving Pallet Town intact, but stripped of all color and life, a gray, silent photograph of what it once was. He had spared it, for now, to make his point. It is finished, Alpha, Silas said, raising his hand. A sphere of pure annihilation, a vortex of absolute nothingness, formed in his palm. The attachments are severed. Now, the pain ends. Ash could barely move. The wild, agonized spark was tearing him apart. He had failed. He had lost everything. He looked up, and his eyes met Pikachu's. His oldest friend. His first bond. The one that wasn't forged of divine power, but of a decade of shared adventure, of trust, of unwavering love. Pikachu stood over him, its small body trembling, but its cheeks sparking with a defiant, hopeless rage. It stood between Ash and the end of all things. No. The roar that ripped itself from Ash's throat was not human. It was the sound of a god's grief, of a protector's rage, of a boy who would not let his best friend die. He didn't use the spark. He became it. He didn't gently reach out to the broken covenants. He seized them. With a sheer, primal act of will born of pure, desperate love, he forced the connections back into existence. The 6 girls, lying unconscious, cried out as their marks flared back to life, not as a gentle glow, but as a searing brand. An agonizing, violent torrent of golden power flooded their spirits, dragging them back, yanking them into the bond by force. It was painful. It was brutal. But it worked. The 6 anchors slammed back into his soul, and the unity spark didn't just stabilize. It detonated. Silas, for the second time in his existence, looked shocked. He saw the golden light erupt from Ash, but this was different. This wasn't the controlled power of a herald. This was the raw, unrestrained fury of creation itself. Girls. Ash's voice boomed in their newly reformed bond, a command and a plea. All of you. All of your Pokemon. Everything. Now. They responded. From their places on the ground, their spirits, though battered, rose to meet his call. And from their Pokeballs, their partners emerged, roaring their defiance. Gyarados, Blaziken, Mamoswine, Haxorus, Delphox, Ninetales. And standing at the forefront, Pikachu, its body now wreathed in an aura of pure gold. They didn't form a circle. They formed a spear. Ash at the tip, the girls as the shaft, and all of their Pokemon as the devastating, elemental power that fueled it. The 7 of them, and all of their partners, unleashed every last ounce of their power, their love, their rage, their hope, into a single, unified, cataclysmic beam. It was a rainbow-colored, golden-hearted torrent of life itself. It was the physical manifestation of every bond he had ever forged. The beam of pure unity struck Silas's sphere of annihilation. For a single, eternal moment, the two absolute, opposing forces met. Creation versus nothingness. Love versus vengeance. The unity was stronger. The sphere of annihilation was overwhelmed, consumed, and obliterated. The beam struck Silas head on. He screamed, a real, human scream of pain and disbelief, as the power of their combined bonds burned away the adversary's darkness, scouring his soul clean, leaving him charred, broken, and powerless. He crashed to the ground, his dark coat disintegrating, leaving just a man in tattered clothes. The light faded. Ash collapsed to his knees, the power receding, leaving him and his partners utterly, completely spent. They had won. They had done the impossible. But Silas was laughing. It was a weak, gurgling sound, but it was laughter. "You fool," he coughed, a trickle of blood at the corner of his mouth. He looked up, not at Ash, but at the black, empty space where the moon should have been. "I wasn't the threat." His laughter grew stronger. "I was the distraction." A new horror dawned in Ash's mind. He pushed himself up, his eyes following Silas's gaze. He reached out with his senses, past the gray shell of Pallet Town, past the atmosphere, into the cosmos. And he saw it. In the void of space, a massive, swirling rift of pure blackness had opened. And from the fabric of reality, a structure of impossible, ethereal beauty was being dragged through it. A celestial palace of gold and crystal, a place outside of time and space. The Hall of Origin. As he watched, the last of it was pulled into the void. The rift sealed shut. The psychic scream that had started it all was suddenly cut off, replaced by an absolute, profound, and terrifying silence. The adversary had captured Arceus. Chapter 8 End. Chapter 9. The Siege of the Void. The world was dying in silence. The gray, lifeless monochrome that had consumed Pallet Town began to spread, a creeping stain of apathy that leached the color and vitality from the very air. The vibrant greens of the Viridian forest faded to ash. The sparkling blue of the ocean north of Cinnabar Island turned to a flat, dull slate. It was the color of a world without a god, a creation untethered from its creator. The life force of the planet was draining away, a slow, quiet bleed into the void. Inside the fragile, rainbow-hued dome of their power, the seven of them picked themselves up from the ground. They were bruised, battered, and soul-weary. The forced reconnection of the covenants had been an act of spiritual violence, a desperate measure that had left an agonizing psychic echo in its wake. But it had held. They were one again, their unity forged anew in the crucible of their near defeat. He took him, Lily whispered, her voice trembling as she stared up at the blank, starless sky. He took Arceus. That psychic scream, that was Arceus being dragged from the Hall of Origin, Dawn confirmed, her mind racing, processing the horrifying implications. Without the creator at the heart of reality, the entire dimension is becoming unstable. It's unraveling. They could all feel it. The unity spark, which was a microcosm of Arceus's own power, was now the sole pillar holding up the crumbling roof of the world. Their bond was the only thing keeping reality from dissolving into static. The pressure was immense, a constant, crushing weight on their spirits. Silas lay unconscious on the ground, no longer a threat, just a broken man. Cynthia's elite guard, who had arrived moments after the battle to a scene of inexplicable devastation, were taking him into custody. The champion herself stood with Professor Oak and Delia Ketchum at the edge of the desaturated town, their faces grim. They were looking to Ash and his partners, their expressions a mixture of awe and helpless terror. They were the leaders, the scientists, the parents, but this was a problem beyond their power to solve. This was a war for the soul of existence, and there were only 7 soldiers. Ash looked at the 6 young women standing with him. They were no longer just his friends, his partners. The brutal reforging of their bonds, the shared agony and subsequent triumph, had crystallized their relationship into its final, truest form. He looked at Misty, her will like tempered steel. At May, her passion a defiant bonfire. At Dawn, her hope a diamond hard point of light. At Iris, her instinct a wild, undeniable truth. At Lily, her grace a shield of selfless love. And at Serena, her heart the unwavering center that held them all together. He finally allowed himself to think the word, not with the awkwardness of a teenager, but with the profound, solemn weight of a man who understood the sacredness of the bond they shared. His wives. A quiet, powerful resolve settled over him, so profound and absolute that it washed through the bond and silenced their fear. He turned to them, and his gaze was not that of a desperate boy, but of a king. He took our God, Ash said, his voice ringing with a power that made the very air vibrate. We're going to take him back. There were no questions. No doubts. Their purpose was singular. They were the last defense of a dying reality. But where did he go? May asked, her eyes scanning the empty, black sky. How do we even get there? The adversary isn't of this dimension, Ash replied, closing his eyes. He reached inward, not to the power, but to the nature of the unity spark. It was a fragment of Arceus. It was a compass that pointed home. He could feel it, a faint, phantom echo of the Hall of Origin, a resonance from beyond the veil of their reality. He took him to his own realm. The void. And I think I can follow. He looked at each of them, a silent question in his eyes. This wasn't a journey to another region. It was a plunge into the heart of their enemy, a place of pure nothingness from which they might never return. Serena stepped forward and took his hand. Together, she said, her voice soft but unbreakable. Misty took his other hand. To the end. The others gathered around, placing their hands over his, a living testament of their unity. They were a constellation, and they would face the darkness as one. Ash took a deep breath. He gathered the full, perfected power of the unity spark. The rainbow-colored light that had shielded the town now converged on them, wrapping them in a brilliant, shimmering cocoon. He focused on the faint echo, the homing signal of his own divine essence. He pulled. The world dissolved. There was a sickening, silent lurch, as if they were being turned inside out. They were no longer moving through space, but through the absence of it. And then they were there. They stood on a floor of what felt like solid, condensed silence. There was no up or down, no east or west. They were in a place of infinite, unending blackness. The void realm. It was not empty. It was aggressively, actively nothing. The stars here were not points of light, but pinpricks of a deeper darkness, holes in the concept of reality itself. The only light, the only color, the only life in this entire anti-dimension, was them. And in the distance, floating in the center of the crushing emptiness, was their objective. The Hall of Origin. But it was a desecrated, dying thing. The ethereal, crystalline palace was now wreathed in massive, coiling chains of living shadow. Its inner light, the font of all creation, was flickering and dim, being siphoned away into the void around it. Surrounding the captured hall was an army. It was a legion of horrors that dwarfed the hordes they had faced before. Shadow Pokemon of every shape and size, from the smallest Zubat to the largest Wailord, all of them twisted mockeries of life, their eyes burning with the cold, violet light of the void. And at their head, coiling protectively around the Hall of Origin like a great, dark serpent, was a creature of true mythological terror. It was Giratina. But it was wrong. Its majestic, otherworldly form was corrupted, its platinum crest cracked and oozing shadow. Its body was a shifting mass of void energy and distorted antimatter, its 6 legs ending in claws of pure annihilation. A void titan, wearing the skin of the renegade god. This was the adversary's army. The final defense. The impossible siege. Well, Iris breathed, a wild, fearless grin spreading across her face. It's not gonna be boring, is it? There was no time for a plan. There was only the plan they had become. Ash was the tip of the spear. Let's go, his voice echoed in their minds. They moved as one. A starburst of life and color in a dead universe. The army of shadows surged to meet them, a silent, screaming tide of corruption. The final war had begun. It was not a battle. It was a symphony of divine destruction. Misty and Iris took the flanks, the offense. Misty's Gyarados, now a leviathan wreathed in the blue light of her will, unleashed a hydro-pump so powerful it was like a river from creation itself, carving a canyon through the shadow horde. Iris and her Haxorus were a whirlwind of primal fury, a manifestation of the world's fighting spirit, its dragon rage a torrent of pure, untamed energy that vaporized anything it touched. May and Dawn were the defense and the strategy. May's Blaziken, its flames burning with the pure red of her passion, moved with the grace of a dancer and the precision of a master strategist, its blaze kicks and flare blitzes hurting the enemy, creating openings, and protecting the core. Dawn's Mamoswine, encased in the diamond-hard aura of her hope, was an unstoppable juggernaut, its ice shards finding and exploiting every weakness in the enemy lines, its every move a perfectly calculated tactical decision. At the center, Serena and Lily were the heart and soul of the assault. They were the engine of life itself. Serena's Delphox did not attack, but unleashed waves of its pink, empathetic mystical fire, which did not burn the shadows, but purified them, turning the corrupted Pokemon back into motes of neutral energy. Lily's Alolan Nettles summoned an Aurora Veil of pure grace, a shimmering, mobile shield that deflected the worst of the void attacks, while its moonblasts healed and re-energized their allies, its power a gentle, unbreakable promise of purity. And at the forefront was Ash. He was no longer a man. He was a being of pure, golden light, a living embodiment of the Alpha. Pikachu was on his shoulder, no longer just an electric mouse, but a conduit for the spark, its entire body blazing with the power of creation. Ash didn't command or fight. He simply was. He moved forward, and the army of shadows parted before him, disintegrating in the face of his absolute, life-giving aura. He was a spear of pure light, carving a direct, unstoppable path through the heart of the darkness, straight towards the chained Hall of Origin. The corrupted Giratina roared a challenge, a silent, psychic bellow of rage and antimatter. It uncoiled from the hall and surged to meet them, a god of the void ready to crush the sparks of life that had dared to invade its home. The six covenants, without a word from Ash, broke formation and converged on the Titan, a coordinated, beautiful, and utterly devastating assault. They would hold back the god. They would buy their Alpha the time he needed. Ash didn't look back. He trusted them with his life, with the world. He reached the Hall of Origin and placed his hands on the colossal shadow chains that bound it. They were cold, so cold they burned, a physical manifestation of the adversary's power. He pushed. The golden light of the unity spark poured from him, a torrent of pure creation against pure annihilation. The chains hissed and recoiled, the sound of sizzling static echoing in the silent void. He pushed harder, the faces of his friends, his family, his partners, flashing in his mind. He pushed with the weight of every bond he had ever made, every promise he had ever kept. With a final, cataclysmic roar of effort, the golden light exploded outwards. The shadow chains shattered, dissolving into nothingness. The Hall of Origin was free. Its inner light, though weak and flickering, pulsed with gratitude. A wave of pure, divine energy washed out, healing their weary Pokemon and bolstering their own spirits. Arceus, though weakened, was free from its prison. But as the last of the shadow chains dissolved, the void around them grew colder. The pressure intensified 1,000-fold. The remnants of the shadow army stopped fighting. They simply ceased to exist, recalled by their master. The corrupted Giratina, which had been locked in a furious battle with the Six Covenants, also froze. Then, its shadowy form dissolved, not into nothingness, but into the ambient darkness around them, as if it were merely a puppet whose strings had been cut. Something was coming. The darkness of the void realm began to coalesce. The pinprick stars of deeper black began to expand, to merge. A shape began to form, a being so vast it defied comprehension. It was a silhouette against the nothingness, a form made of the absence of light, a body composed of cold, dead galaxies and dying stars. It had no face, only a presence, a consciousness so immense and so ancient it made Arceus feel young. It was the adversary. The great unmaking itself had finally taken the field. A voice, the same layered, dissonant chorus from Silas's cell but now infinitely more powerful, echoed not in their ears, but in the very structure of their souls, a vibration that threatened to unmake their existence. You have failed, Herald. The Creator is weak. Your light is but a candle in my infinite darkness. It moved, not by traveling, but by simply being where it wasn't a moment before. It loomed over the freed Hall of Origin, a living universe of death ready to devour the spark of creation. Creation's time is over. Chapter 9 End. Chapter 10. The God of Life. The adversary's presence was not a force. It was a fundamental law of physics, a statement of absolute truth. All things end. The air, the void, the very concept of existence grew thin and brittle around the seven of them. Their combined power, which had felt like a star, was now a flickering candle flame in a wind tunnel the size of a universe. With a unified will born of desperation, they unleashed their ultimate attack. It was the Tempest. Formation. The spear of unity, every ounce of their combined power focused into a single, magnificent beam of rainbow-colored, life-giving light. It was the roar of a world that refused to die. The beam crossed the silent void and struck the colossal, star-devouring form of the adversary. And was erased. It did not impact. It did not explode. It simply ceased to be, its light and power unwritten from reality a meter from the adversary's shadowy hide. The silence that followed was the sound of absolute hopelessness. They had thrown the life of a world at it, and the void had not even noticed. A pressure that wasn't physical but existential bore down on them. The unity spark inside Ash groaned, the covenants flickering, threatening to be snuffed out not by an attack, but by the sheer, overwhelming proximity to their conceptual opposite. They were a living paradox in a realm of non-existence, and the realm was beginning to correct the error. Ash felt it then, through the spark. A single, infinitesimally small thread of possibility. A path. The void realm was a sealed dimension, but with Arceus now free, a pinprick of a connection to their own reality existed. If he poured every last erg of the unity spark into that pinprick, he could tear open a hole. An escape route. It would be a one-way trip, and the energy required would be absolute. He could save them. He could save a weakened Arceus. They could escape, find a new, empty corner of the cosmos, and use the last embers of the Creator's power to begin again. To rebuild a new world. But this world, their home, their memories, their love, would be left behind, a final meal for the ever-patient void. Through the bond, the six of them saw it too. They saw the choice with the same terrible clarity. They could run, survive, and carry a memory of what was lost. Or they could stay, and be a final, defiant firework that no one would ever see. They looked at each other, their faces illuminated by the defiant, flickering light of their own auras. There was no debate, no discussion. There was only a quiet, profound, and unanimous acceptance. Misty's cerulean eyes met Ash's, and she gave a single, sharp nod. Her will was unbending, even at the end of all things. May offered a small, fierce grin, the passionate fire in her spirit refusing to be cowed. Go down swinging, right? We made a difference, Dawn said, her voice a beacon of unwavering hope, a final, beautiful truth in a universe of lies. Iris let out a short, wild laugh, her eyes blazing with the thrill of the ultimate battle. What a fight it's been. Lily's gentle gaze was filled not with fear, but with a pure, profound gratitude. With you, Ash, always. Serena, the heart of them all, looked at him, her smile filled with a love so immense it defied the encroaching nothingness. Tears streamed down her face, but her voice was steady. Together. Ash looked at them, at this impossible family forged in the heart of a dying world, and his own heart broke and was remade in an instant. He saw their choice. He saw their love, their courage. And he refused to accept it. He shook his head, a slow, determined motion. A different smile touched his lips, one filled not with acceptance, but with a fierce, brilliant, and utterly insane idea. Not to the end, he said, his voice a low, powerful promise that resonated through the bond. To the beginning. He moved before they could process his words. He surged forward, a blur of golden light. He kissed Misty, a quick, fierce press of lips that tasted of salt and stubborn loyalty. He kissed May, a warm, passionate kiss that burned with shared adventure. He kissed Dawn, a gentle, thoughtful kiss filled with a universe of shared dreams. He kissed Iris, a wild, laughing kiss that tasted of freedom and the open sky. He kissed Lily, a tender, protective kiss that was a silent vow of safety. And finally, he turned to Serena. He cupped her face in his hands, his thumb brushing away a tear. He looked into her eyes, the very heart of his own soul, and he poured every unspoken word, every shared memory, every ounce of his love for all of them into one final, desperate, perfect kiss. I love you, he whispered, his voice for her alone, but his meaning for all of them. All of you. He pulled back, his eyes blazing with a divine, sacrificial light. Live. Before they could react, before they could even form a thought of protest, he acted. He reached into the core of his own soul, into the very structure of the unity spark, and he tore it apart. He didn't just release the covenants, he severed them from himself with an act of sheer, unimaginable will. The six of them cried out as a sudden, agonizing void opened in their souls where his presence had been. It was a physical, tearing sensation, the feeling of a limb being ripped away. He didn't just cut them loose. He pushed. He channeled the entirety of the alpha spark, the power of will, passion, knowledge, instinct, grace, and heart, outward. He poured all of his life, all of his love, all of his essence into them, a final, desperate gift of power. Their bodies blazed with a golden light that was not their own. He then seized them, the weakened Arceus, and all of their Pokemon in a grip of pure telekinetic force. With the last of his strength, he threw them. He hurled the most precious things in his universe towards that single, tiny pinprick of light, that escape route back to their reality. And with his final act of will, he turned and faced the adversary, sealing the rift from the inside. The golden light faded from him. The divine power was gone. He was no longer a herald, no longer the Alpha. He was just Ash Ketchum from Pallet Town, a boy in a battered jacket, standing alone in the heart of oblivion. Pikachu, who had been thrown with the others, leapt from the disappearing portal at the last possible second, landing softly on his shoulder, a familiar, comforting weight. Ash looked up at the galaxy-sized being of pure shadow, at the god of nothingness that was its own universe. He felt no fear, only a strange, profound peace. You wanted zero, you overgrown shadow. Ash said, his voice quiet but echoing in the vast emptiness. He gave Pikachu a final, gentle scratch under the chin. You got it, but you'll never have them. He closed his eyes and let go. He didn't detonate the empty space where the alpha spark had been. He detonated himself. His life force, his soul, his very essence, every bond he had ever made, every ounce of love he had ever felt, he turned it all into fuel. He became the very concept he had embodied. He became life. An explosion of pure, absolute, unrestrained creation erupted from the boy and his partner. It was not a blast of fire or force. It was a shockwave of being, a tidal wave of life that crashed against the silent, waiting shore of nothingness. For a single, impossible moment in the heart of the void, there was light. Epilogue. 1 year later. Pallet Town was beautiful. The sun shone with a particular warmth, the leaves on the trees were a vibrant, impossible green, and the air hummed with a palpable energy of life and joy. The world was not just healed. It was renewed, reborn, more vibrant than it had ever been. 6 young women walked up the path to the Ketchum residence. They were different now. They carried themselves with an aura of quiet, immense power, a grace that was more than human. The silvery covenant marks on their hands still remained, no longer a link to a single person, but a mark of their sacred duty. They were the guardians of creation, each protecting her region, each a living testament to the power of the bonds they had once shared. They met here, in Pallet Town, once every year. On this day, Delia Ketchum greeted them at the door with hugs, her eyes filled with a sad but profound pride. They were a family, forged in a war no one else would ever remember. They didn't go to a grave. There was no body to bury. They went to a simple, smooth stone placed under the great oak tree on the hill behind Professor Oak's lab, the place where a 10-year-old boy had once seen a Ho-Oh and started a journey. They weren't mourning. They were celebrating. They laid down flowers, shared stories, and laughed, their voices carrying on the warm breeze. They were not broken. They were whole, filled with the light he had given them. As the sun began to set, casting long, peaceful shadows, a figure of shimmering white and gold appeared before them. Arceus, its power fully restored, bowed its head to them. He is not gone, my guardians, the Creator's voice echoed in their hearts, a sound of infinite gratitude and love. He is everywhere. He sacrificed his form, his individuality, to become the very concept he fought to protect. He is the life you feel in the wind. The bond you share with your Pokemon. The unwavering hope that rises with the dawn. The alpha spark has been woven into the fabric of this renewed world. He is the new god of life. A single tear rolled down Serena's cheek, but she was smiling. Misty put a comforting arm around her shoulder. May looked at the simple stone, then up at the sunset, a familiar, fiery grin on her face. He always did have to be the very best, didn't he? She said, her voice catching, but filled with a deep, unshakable love. They laughed, a soft, shared sound of sorrow and joy. And as they looked out at the horizon, A flicker of pure, golden light, like a firefly made of a sunbeam, danced across the evening sky. And for just a second, in the deepest, truest part of their souls, they all felt him. Not as a memory, but as a presence. As warm, as real, and as loving as he had ever been. He was with them. Always. Chapter 10 End.